morning to you. Happy Sunday. We've been going through the papers this morning, and this one caught our eye, didn't it, Martin? It
did, yeah. It's shrinkflation. Everything is getting smaller, cost of living crisis. And, of course, companies who want to take the same money out of your pocket, they don't put the prices up, but they make the portion sizes smaller.
Yes, a Magnum multi-pack, and I must say, I did this the other day, bought a packet of Magnums.
Yeah.
There used to be 4 in a pack, now 3 in a pack, down 25%.
Yeah.
And it's probably still the same cost, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I've definitely noticed this one as well, sharing bags of chocolate. You know, those big bags you can get.
They're sort of half empty now, aren't they?
Half empty?
Yeah.
There's nothing in there.
It's mostly fresh air.
Yeah, and it's definitely for one person now. You definitely couldn't share.
Well, that's a good excuse.
Dairy milk buttons from 240 grams to 184 grams, so down 23%.
And Club biscuits, a favourite of mine and my kids, used to be an 8-pack, same price, now a 7-pack. An entire biscuit has gone missing in action.
Yeah, it's bad, really bad, isn't it? Yes, and apparently digestives, they've gone down as well by 40 grams. That must be at least a biscuit.
Yeah, and Simple soap, it's 20% smaller, a smaller bar of soap. See, all of this really gets on my wick, because they don't tell you. This is like a covert pickpocket, same price, less items.
Yep, and you don't realise till you get it home. So you've already paid for it, you've already opened it, and then you realise there's not as much as there once was in here. Yeah. And it makes a difference, doesn't it? It means, essentially, you have to shop more frequently because you're getting less in your basket.
Like, see, there's always been a conversation about things getting smaller, like Twix or Mars bars. Like, are these getting smaller, or my hands are getting bigger, or am I just getting fatter? But now we know it's official. These things are officially shrinking. Yeah.
It's not good, is it? Well, let us know what you've spotted in your weekly shop. What are you still paying the same price for, but getting less of? It drives me mad, and it's happening all across the country, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah.
And you've also seen a story about barbecues, haven't you?
Yeah, that's also in the Daily Mail. So there's a survey out saying that we know that men have always liked the bit of a barbecue where they get the fire going. They get covered in sort of murk and they get all the smell. And it's official that 35% of men say that's their favourite bit. And, interestingly, 40% of women agree. So women like men doing it. Is that because, Eddie, they like men to get dirty and do all the whole bit? Or does it bring out the inner caveman, which the woman also likes to watch?
Well, no. See, I think there's something about an open flame. It does just bring out the caveman instinct. It's like men are only really interested in cooking. Sorry if that's a sweeping generalisation, but it seems as though men are only really interested in cooking if it involves over an open flame on a barbecue. Well, but I think women end up doing all the prep for a barbecue anyway.
I think that's why blokes like to sort of, I'm just going into the garden, and you
stand with a beer.
You've got your own little private space, and you get mucky, it brings out a bit of testosterone. I think everyone's a winner.
But if you were to do that, so do you like barbecuing?
I love them, yeah.
So would you do all the prep before? Like, would you head to the shops, get all the bits, set it all up? Yeah. Or would you just physically stand there and flip burgers?
I like to do a bit of both, but I'm not so big on all the chopping up.
This is what I'm saying. Yeah. So your wife would end up doing everything else, and you'd do the standing and the flipping of the burgers.
I'm a complete gender stereotype.
Yes.
But I think most people, gender stereotypes are that for a reason. It's like, no, this is my role.
That's essentially what this is saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
That people do stick to their gender stereotypes when it comes to barbecuing. I just know how it goes down in your house. Is it the man who's on the barbecue doing the flipping of the burgers? Is it the woman who does the prep? Or is it the other way around? Do you share your roles?
Yeah, and sorry about the caveman impression.
Yeah, I thought that was a monkey, actually.
All right, well, a bit of both.
Bit of both, perhaps. GBnews at GBnews.com. Now, Manchester City remain on course for a legendary treble after victory in the FA Cup final at Wembley.
Yeah, Gundogan scored twice to give them a victory over Manchester United in a largely one-sided affair. Our reporter Sophie Reaper has the story.
One city, two teams. One red, one blue. An ancient rivalry played out in an FA Cup final for the very first time. Yesterday, tens of thousands of Manchester City and Manchester United fans made the pilgrimage to Wembley in order to support their teams. As the day wore on and kick-off drew ever closer, it was clear expectations were high.
100% trust in them. Too much trust in them. But we're going to beat them anyway, it's fine.
I'm quietly confident. I'm very confident, actually.
Derby matches are always a bit of a nightmare, but
Fingers crossed.
We're big underdogs and they're a hell of a team. They've done brilliantly. But I believe we can beat them today.
I've supported them for so long and it's our time now. It's just our time.
At 3 o'clock, the whistle blew and the game began. Within just 13 seconds, City's captain İlkay Gündoğan had smashed a volley into the back of the net. Not only did that give his side a near instantaneous lead, but it also broke the record for the fastest goal ever scored in an FA Cup final. After that, the United fans were forced to wait with bated breath for a response. And in the 33rd minute, their patience was rewarded when Bruno Fernandes took to the penalty spot and made it count. In the end, a second goal from City's captain clinched a win for the Manchester Blues.
I'm absolutely elated. 2 out of 3. We're going to do the treble. We're going to take it from them after a whole history of hurt.
It's a tight game, but yeah, absolutely fantastic. Best day ever.
We deserved it. First goal, 13 seconds, 15 seconds. You know, I've just lost for words.
A disappointment for the United fans yesterday, but there were still some positives to be taken away.
I'm good, but I'm proud of him. I think they did really well.
I think we could do more tackling in this season. But in next season, we might get some new players to do better.
Overall, I think a good season, and next season, title challenge again.
It was 2 titans of the game that went head-to-head yesterday, but ultimately it was Pep Guardiola's Manchester City that came out victorious. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Manchester City on our way to Istanbul.
And one man who was watching the game was sports broadcaster and journalist Aidan McGee. Aidan, City were quick out the box yesterday, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, 13 seconds. I mean, you're going up, if you're Man United, you're going up against this all-conquering side. Well, they look as if they're going to be an all-conquering side. They've won a lot of trophies in recent years. They're on course for the treble now as well. You're not helping yourself, Ellie, if you concede after 13 seconds. Yeah. And the previous fastest FA Cup final goal, 2009, Louis Saha scored for Everton against Chelsea, 24 seconds. I think Roberto Di Matteo did it for Chelsea in 97, 27 seconds, I think that was. 13 seconds, extraordinary. The fastest goal I've seen in live football was probably 8 seconds, I think. So, you know, you're on it's an uphill battle as soon as you start doing that. There was shell-shocked early on. Yeah. But, you know, although that was a great hit, I do think United held their own in the game. I thought they had a go.
Yeah, they were 6-1 outsiders at the start of the game, but that early goal rocked them. It's going to do that. But they turned up at the races. They put in a good performance. I thought it was a really decent.
Some people were predicting a 3-4 goal defeat for margin of defeat for United. Bear in mind, City have beaten Real Madrid 4-0 recently. They beat Liverpool 4-1. Last month as well, or the month before rather. So, you know, I think they had a go towards the end. Garnacho came on in the second half, and he showed. He did. They started having more territory in City's half. He began to. He was a bit. You just need a bit of fearlessness sometimes when you play against Man City.
He went at him, didn't he?
He did. And he just started getting down the left-hand side, taking players on in the box. That doesn't happen to City very often. A couple of close shaves right towards the end. And you could tell with the United fans who had been interviewed afterwards, they were quite philosophical. They knew going into the game that the odds of victory were quite slim. Yeah. Even though they'd beaten City a few months ago at Old Trafford, but they were, as I say, they can see the bigger picture. They can see progress on last season, and they didn't disgrace themselves on the day. That's for sure. And
it's interesting because we have Man City on the verge of another treble.
Immortality, in a way, yeah.
And we've got Man United on the verge of a big money Qatari takeover. So there's optimistic futures for both teams.
Oh, yeah, look, I mean, City can go and do the treble next Saturday. I fully expect them to do it now. They're playing Inter Milan in Internazionale. Italian football clubs aren't as strong as they were 10, 15 years ago. Inter have done well getting to the final, but I expect, with the prize being so big, I can't believe City are going to mess this one up. I mean, he overthinks things sometimes. Pep Guardiola, we saw 2 years ago in the Champions League final against Chelsea. He tinkered with his side. They didn't lay a glove on Chelsea. Chelsea, who hadn't finished anywhere in the league that season, went and won the Champions League. So I don't think they will go down that road again. I think Inter will be solid opposition, don't get me wrong, but I fully expect them now to go and win the Champions League and become only the second British club to have won the treble.
Do you think if they do it, the neutrals will accept their triumph, or will they start saying, well, you just bought your way to success?
Well, it's not just about buying, it's about whether they've broken the rules. Don't forget, there's 128 charges against them if it's found that they were paying players through the books in this country, Ellie, but also giving them a little bit of an extra sweetener out of a different country and not paying tax on it, etc., that's circumventing the rules. Well, it's not circumventing the rules, it's breaking the rules. And that's been going on, if that's been proved to have been going on for 10 years plus, then their triumphs will be tainted. There's no question about that. But at the moment, they're wrapping the UEFA up and FIFA up in litigation.
Yeah.
They're
drag on forever, won't it?
Well, it is. I mean, sometimes there's a zeitgeist about these charges. If you do them at the time, it feels more relevant. It feels as if City are getting due punishment. Yeah. If it's not dealt with for another 18 months. And also, I don't really think Chelsea, who've overspent, and Newcastle, who look like they're going to overspend, really want the book thrown at Manchester City. No. And it's about the football regulator as well. The Premier League want to be proving that they've got their house in order. Yeah. We don't need a regulator. Look at how we've treated Manchester City. So there's a bit of politics with it as well. But in terms of as a football team, they are second to none. It's probably one of the best teams I've ever seen.
Wow.
Need to ask you about an arrest that took place yesterday for a man wearing an offensive football shirt. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, it was so disgusting, Ellie, when I saw it. I didn't believe it was true. I thought it was mocked up by some sicko. But it turns out that some bloke did actually wear a T-shirt, as we can see now. For the benefit of our radio listeners, we've got somebody with a 97, which denotes the number of people who died at the Hillsborough disaster, the stadium tragedy in 1989. The latest victim of that disaster only died relatively recently. He was in a coma for all that time. And above it, we've got the words "not enough."
Yeah, I mean, despicable stuff.
It is.
Shocking.
It is. Well, absolutely. I mean, and it's not representative of Man United fans. This is one idiot, one sick.
It's interesting. We're discussing after this about politics and freedom of expression. This guy was arrested. I think that was the right thing to do.
Yes, it was. It was. And also,
why do you think it was?
Yeah, I do. As I said, I didn't think it was real, first of all. That's how shocked I was by what I saw. He's taken the trouble to buy a shirt and spend 50, 60 quid getting that put on the back. Probably even more than that, actually. So the Met released a statement last night saying this is a public order offence. They've worked with the Wembley Stadium officials and they've managed to locate the guy. I believe Man United fans were complicit in trying to track him down as well, which is encouraging.
That is very good.
So we'll wait and see what happens with it now. But I've never known an offence like that. I've never really known anybody be arrested for something that's said on a T-shirt. So I don't know if the legislation's there to actually deal with it. But you'd hope it was.
I think in that particular instance, the right thing to do was to arrest him for his own safety.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
I mean, to walk into a football stadium wearing something like that.
Also
you've got to have a death wish.
Yeah.
And post for photos.
It's moronic beyond belief.
I mean, it's gone viral online.
I know. I honestly didn't believe. I thought no one can do that. No one can do that. That's some sicko at home has mocked that up.
Yeah. And it took me a while to work out what it meant. And then once I had, I was like, surely not.
I know. Look, there's been historical tragedy chanting down the years between lots of different clubs. Most of the top clubs have got some kind of disaster attached to their history over the last 40 or 50 years, and there are a minority of people and a minority of supporters, in inverted commas, who will try and poke fun at that, which is disgusting.
Yeah, it kind of put the dampeners on the event slightly, but I think the police did the right thing, and let's not dwell on the bad bits. It was a fantastic performance.
It was.
Got time to quickly talk about the racing?
Can I just mention Celtic quickly? The one
they won. That's our last story, Aidan. So just
OK, Celtic winning the treble in Scotland.
3-1?
3-1 against Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Their manager, Andrew Postecoglou, looks like he's going to Tottenham. And we need to touch on the Epsom derby as well. 19 arrests, including some preemptive ones as well, before the event happened. One person got on the track. Frankie Dettori, I think you had some money on him, did you?
Yeah, I had a cheeky tenner for the romantic Hollywood ending, but it wasn't to be.
No, he finished 12th, although King of Steel, 66-1 outsider, was ahead. Right until the end, he was chased down by Auguste Rodin, who was ridden by Ryan Moore, and that was trained by Aidan O'Brien as well, his 9th Derby winner. Yeah. So good that we're talking about the sport and what happened on the field of play.
Superb, absolutely.
See you next hour.
Always a pleasure. See you in a bit.
Thanks very much. Thank you. OK, let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today.
And India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, has vowed to punish those responsible for India's worst rail disaster for decades. At least 288 people have been killed and around 850 injured in the accident in the eastern state of Odisha. 3 trains were involved. 2 passenger trains collided when one derailed, and both of them crashed into a goods train.
More than 2,600 NHS staff in Scotland have taken time off work due to long COVID, with some off sick for more than 2 years. That's according to Freedom of Information requests by the Scottish Liberal Democrats. The Scottish Government says it's investing £10 million into the Long COVID Support Fund.
And the Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court tomorrow to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror over alleged unlawful information gathering. Harry claims around 140 published articles contain information gathered using unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. So our next story now, and a new code of practice for the police came into effect yesterday. It will protect freedom of speech by ensuring officers record non-crime hate incidents only when absolutely necessary.
Well, the new code of practice will safeguard people's fundamental right to freedom of expression, protect their personal data, and ensure that non-crime hate incidents are not recorded when someone is merely offended.
Well, it sounds like a welcome dollop of common sense. And for more on this, we're now joined by Mark Lehane, former special advisor to Nadhim Zahawi. Hello there. Good morning to you. So this seems like a positive move. There are over 120,000 of these non-crime hate incidents recorded. That can be anything from somebody feeling offended about a social media post. So surely this is a move in the right direction.
That's right. I think this could be a really, really important move. Although we have to remember that the reason why the Home Secretary made sure that this new code of practice was brought in was because when she changed some of the College of Policing guidance a year ago, that didn't appear to have the effect that people wanted then. So yes, this should be a good move. Hopefully it will protect people's freedom of expression a lot more and make sure that people aren't weaponising their offence to try and dampen down debate and to try and get their own way in public life.
And Mark, essentially this is about getting police back to fighting crime and getting bobbies back on the beat.
That's right. We want our police dealing with stuff on the streets. We don't want them dealing with dodgy tweets, as it were. We want them to really focus on important issues. And unfortunately, too much of their time has been bogged up in recent years with cases where people have expressed offence, said that stuff was a non-crime hate incident, when really it was just them not liking what people were saying. There's enough real crime going on out there that we need the police focusing on that, not just dealing with people saying stuff that they don't like. Now, you mentioned that there was a case at the football yesterday where someone turned up wearing a pretty offensive shirt. That probably was the right kind of situation for the police to get involved, because there was a genuine risk of that situation escalating and people getting hurt. Obviously, we want the police to be able to wade in on stuff like that, but not when people are putting stuff on social media or getting involved in debates and people don't like what they're saying.
Fantastic point. There was a clear risk of danger, a clear risk of an escalation of that circumstance. It was in the physical world. It was people together. That guy, I think, would have been in grave danger. Whereas, oftentimes, a friend of mine was arrested for posting something that somebody felt to be transphobic, and 7 coppers turned up at his house. 7 coppers turned up at his house in a riot van. Meanwhile, we reported last week 30,000 muggings going unsolved. 6% of burglaries even have a clear-up now. And it's way, way overdue. When did the police even bother getting involved in monitoring free speech? Surely it's not their job to do that, Mark.
Well, I have to say, I do have a bit of sympathy for some of the police involved in this, because they're trapped between demand from people that they wade in on these non-crime hate incidents and also their desire to get them, like you said, deal with what most of us would consider to be real crimes. Hopefully, with this new code of practice, it's going to give them the space to focus on the most important things, which are, like you said, those real crimes on real streets with real people rather than hurt feelings.
And it's important legislation. When it was introduced, it was very well-meaning. It came off the back of the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. It was meant to be tracing hateful comments around race, religion, sexual orientation, disability. But then came the transgender movement and the perception, that's the key word, the perception of something being offensive was enough to get the police involved. I think it was crazy. I think this is a welcome move. Do you think this is the beginning of a more common-sense approach to policing? Is this the beginning, Mark? Are we seeing the end of people getting the coppers involved just because they're offended?
Well, I think it could be one part in a broader move, couldn't it, towards a much more common-sense approach, not just to policing, but also how we expect our politicians and people in public life to be able to get on with things. We've seen, haven't we, in the last week, Kathleen Stock going to speak at the Oxford Union, the Prime Minister coming out to support her in being able to do that, and that was talking, as you mentioned, around transgender issues. There have been lots of other issues where people have weaponised their concern or their feelings about stuff and tried to use the police and other elements of the law to get their own way. That's not a good way for a free society. We can be grown up and have grown-up conversations and in a common sense way, as you're doing very well on GBNews a lot of the time. So hopefully this is one part in a broader move to enabling people to get back on this debate, disagree with one another, disagree robustly, but also at the same time respect one another's opinions and be able to get on with our own lives and disagree where we need to.
Mark, whilst we've got you, I want to ask about Rishi Sunak's trip to Washington a little bit later on this week. He'll be heading there on Wednesday and Thursday for talks with politicians and a sit-down with Joe Biden. And he says it's all about wanting to foster that close and candid relationship with the US. What do you think is going to be on the agenda?
Well, there's an awful lot for them to be discussing. Obviously, growth is going to be a big thing. Both of our economies are facing challenges. And so hopefully there are rumours he's going to be able to announce loads of business deals and investment in the United Kingdom. Obviously, the big thing that they need to be talking about, though, is Ukraine. It is really reassuring to see very close relationships being fostered between Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden. It's really, really important that the UK and the USA can work closely together. We've been doing that really well around what's going on in Ukraine and making sure that they have all the weapons that they need. So I think it's going to focus on the Ukraine and on business investments in the UK. And inevitably, there'll be lots of other issues around that as well, particularly around green investment, the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States and the impact that that will be having on businesses investing over there, but whether we can get them to invest over here as well. Lots to do. And it's great to see Rishi Sunak on the international stage rebuilding Britain's credibility. We had a bit of a wobble last year. People weren't necessarily seeing the United Kingdom in the way that we wanted them to. Whatever people might think about Rishi Sunak, there is no doubt he's a much smoother operator on the international stage, and that's what we need right now.
Superb. Mark Lehane, thank you very much for your insight this morning. That was excellent. Thank you. OK, moving on now. The editor of This Morning has spoken out about the disgraced departure of Philip Schofield from the programme.
Yes, Martin Frizzell has said to read between the lines amid accusations of a toxic work environment at ITV, adding he thinks that scores are being settled.
Well, let's speak now to showbiz reporter Steph Tetcher. You've been all over this week.
Yes.
Let's be absolutely clear here. When he's talking about scores to settle, he's talking about a guy who usually sits here.
Yeah.
He's talking about Eamon Holmes, isn't he?
Well, this week, there has been no smoke without fire with this Philip Schofield scandal, and a lot of former colleagues in the limelight, including Eamon Holmes, Dan Wootton, have spoken about their experiences with ITV and very publicly on this channel. But then also we've had people like Dr. Ranj Singh, who, again, is not associated with this channel, but has spoken out about how he spoke to Emma Gormley, who is the head of daytime programme at ITV, about Martin Frizzell's behaviour. So I was quite surprised to see that Martin actually came out with this so publicly yesterday, because the cases have been building up against him. He said it's been like the 23rd day this morning has been on the front pages of the newspaper, and he's saying his staff need a bit of respite from it. He says he works with a fantastic team of women, mainly mums. But what's quite interesting about this is that the Mail on Sunday have come out with saying that actually he was investigated in 2019 over cases of sexism over ex-senior staff. So, you know, by him speaking out, there's a lot of cases building up against ITV. But one thing, he does come very self-assured, very confident, because they have now hired an external barrister who's going to be investigating all these claims. So he does seem very confident that ITV will come on top out of this.
Confident or cocky?
A bit of both, Martin. I think it is a bit of both, because, you know, ITV say they've investigated all these claims that have come in the past, but this is done by ITV. So it'll be quite interesting to see if it was done externally, whether more evidence will be brought out and whether they view things differently, because there's been so many cases that have been, you know, coming out in the newspapers that, you know, surely some of them must be of substantial that needs to be looked into.
Do you think he may have spoken too prematurely, Steph? Because, as you say, they've got this external investigation that's going to be undertaken by a barrister. Also next week is the questioning of ITV execs by MPs. It seems remarkable, really, that he's come out fighting ahead of all of these investigations and questioning.
Well, that's why I feel like there's an air of confidence from ITV that they haven't done anything wrong. I think most organisations organisations or most representatives will be quite humble and quite quiet because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. So maybe ITV feel quite confident that there hasn't been this culture of toxicity which has been all splattered over the newspapers over the past week.
Talking of which, we've got 2 front pages today which include Holly, and she's obviously returning to the show tomorrow. The Sun, we've got The Sun. Apparently she has a tearful monologue prepared, and she's going to get out there and give it the wobbly lip treatment, no doubt.
Well, this is going to be nail-biting viewing stuff to watch because, you know, it's been all about Holly and her reaction this week. What is she going to say? We know she hasn't responded to Philip Schofield, so she's going to have to talk to her viewers. There are still loyal This Morning viewers who enjoy that show, who love Holly, so she's going to have to discuss about what's happened, and it's almost like put an end to it in that sense and give her point of view. So it'll be quite interesting what she has to say. But I know a lot of people have been thinking about her future in ITV, but the newspaper's also reporting that the BBC have been getting their digs in with Holly and apparently making offers to her. If it doesn't work out with ITV, maybe there's a future waiting for her at BBC.
And what sense do you get of what she will say in this monologue? Because it is very interesting. She hasn't said a lot.
No,
she hasn't. 2 very, very short statements on Instagram. And she isn't a controversial character.
No, she isn't.
She's a girl next door.
Totally. Nation sweetheart.
Nation sweetheart, exactly. Everybody adores her. So what kind of line do you think she's going to toe tomorrow?
I think she's going to bring out the waterworks. I think she's going to be quite emotional about it because, you know, sorry for my sarcasm, but I think she's been friends with Philip for 14 years. They've had a personal relationship, gone on holidays together. Their families have, you know, become very close. So I think this is going to be quite an emotional speech for her. I think also knowing the amount of press and criticism that's been surrounding everything, she really does have to address everything in the correct way.
Well, you've been staying, Stephanie, for some time now. If a story goes on for longer than 2 weeks...
Yeah.
But it's now rolling into its 3rd week, and we're still talking about it. This is one that's going to roll. It's going to be more pantomime, and no doubt you're going to be very busy.
I am going to be very busy watching
Stephanie Techi, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. She's a star. She's still going. Stay with us. Lots more to come, including Ron DeSantis slams Joe Biden after his fall on stage this week. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good morning, welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie. And remember, you can get in touch with us all morning on any of the stories that we're talking about today. We're talking about shrinkflation. It's a big story in the Daily Mail today. Apparently, many of our everyday items in supermarkets are selling at the same price, perhaps even more expensive, but there's much less in the packets. Let us know what you've spotted when you're doing your shopping. For me, it's Magnums or chocolate.
And for me, it's Club biscuits. There used to be 8, now there's 7. There's a Club missing in action. It's outrageous. It has to stop.
It's really, really annoying, and you don't notice till you get home. Let us know what you've spotted in your basket. gbnews@gbnews.com.
OK, to America now. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis launched a blazing attack on Joe Biden's premiership yesterday, telling supporters in South Carolina that the president's fall on stage this week summed up America's decline.
Well, the Republican challenger told hundreds of Republicans that he wanted to send the president back to his basement in Delaware.
Yeah, fighting talk there. Let's speak now to our US and international politics professor, Scott Lucas. Good morning to you, Scott. So, say what you like about American politics. It's never boring. And here we go again, all guns blazing. Ron DeSantis taking a huge swipe at Joe Biden. What do you make of it?
I mean, Joe Biden was back on his feet very quickly after a trip on a stage. He not only attended that ceremony, he then gave a nationally televised address from the Oval Office on Friday night. He then signed on Saturday the very important and essential bill to lift the U.S. debt ceiling to avoid an economic crisis. He's meeting Rishi Sunak, as you noted, this week to discuss important issues such as the Russian aggression in Ukraine, which are the issues that we should be talking about. Ron DeSantis looked for a cheap headline. Fair enough, he just got it. But it would probably be more important for Ron DeSantis, if he wants to be exciting, to actually address issues like economic issues, including the latest jobs report, the latest report on inflation, immigration, women's rights, LGBT rights, abortion, all of those issues like healthcare, which are going to concern Americans, rather than repeating the fairly tired old line that Donald Trump tried in 2020 about Sleepy Joe.
Yeah, but it's fair to say, though, he said in the speech, our country continues to stub its toe, our country continues to trip and fall, our country continues to go in the wrong direction. He's, of course, talking about soaring inflation, interest rates, particularly food inflation, the price of gas hitting a lot of Americans in the pocket, and also the open border with Mexico. There's been calamity over some laws that Biden has signed. So he was using the fall as a metaphor for the state of the nation. He's saying that none of those points are valid.
But inflation's fallen 9 out of the past 10 months in a row. It's at its lowest point since the pandemic. U.S. unemployment is at its lowest rate since 1969, including better than expected jobs increases yesterday. The infrastructure bill has led to an unprecedented amount of investment in bridges, roads, the internet, the bill for a green economy, and these investments as we move to try to protect both energy and the environment. A bill passed with Republican support is being implemented. So where is this country which is in terminal decline? Again, that's a cheap line to grab a headline, but it doesn't have substance. So, Mr. DeSantis, as was said by Walter Mondale to Gary Hart in 1984, where's the beef? Where's the beef in your policies, rather than simply taking lines that actually aren't connected with the facts to get a headline?
Well, DeSantis will also be alarmingly aware of his position in the polls. He is trailing behind Trump, that gap only widening since that chaotic campaign launch.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point to talk not just about the fact that Donald Trump is there, but there are a lot of other Republican candidates as well. For example, Mike Pence, who was once vice president, you might remember, will make his announcement on Wednesday. Nikki Haley, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, has declared. Tim Scott, the first major black candidate to run for the Republican nomination, has declared. Indeed, there were 8 candidates, including Mr. DeSantis, in Iowa yesterday at one of the barbecues that traditionally open up campaigning. The one person who wasn't there was Donald Trump.
Can we have a quick word? Sorry, Martin. Can we have a quick word on Mike Pence, just because you've mentioned that? Because that is an extraordinary situation, isn't it, Scott, that a former VP is running against a former president? Or could be on Wednesday.
It's not just the fact that a former VP is running against a former president. It's extraordinary that in the context that on January 6, 2021, when Mike Pence's life was being threatened by people who attacked the Capitol, Donald Trump, according to the documents that we have, didn't protect him. So there's a bit of a like urgent context, which is there. I think you're going to see Pence try to make the argument that America needs to return to stability. It needs to return to a politics which is not based on division, which will position him, I think, not just against Donald Trump, but probably against Mr. DeSantis, who is going to try to out-Trump Trump with some of his lines.
Do you think maybe that's what this is about? Attacking Joe Biden, going for the Sleepy Joe, the basement stuff, the falling over. At the moment, Trump's on 43%, DeSantis only on 18%. The candidates you mentioned there are struggling to even break double digits. Is this just a kind of jousting contest in the red camp, if you like, to be the most outspoken, the most controversial, grab the headlines? It's all about winning the Republican vote, not actually swaying the nation.
Well, that's two things. First of all, you know, the polls in 2015 at this point had Jeb Bush ahead. Where is he now? We're still 9 months away from the first primary, so be careful with that. But the two things are, one is, yes, you nailed it. Ron DeSantis is trying to take Donald Trump's attack lines over Joe Biden and trying to turn it up to 11, so to speak. But secondly, Ron DeSantis has decided that rather than run a campaign on issues, rather than run a campaign which talks about uniting Americans, he's going to try to run this red meat, fire-breathing attack with this idea of woke, whatever woke means. And of course, it really doesn't mean much. The way that he phrases it, he's going to whip up the idea of culture wars. He's going to whip up the idea, in fact, of division rather than actually addressing the issues. The question is, how many Americans want to go for that type of divisive approach rather than actually trying to get to grips with the very real issues that are affecting them on a day-to-day basis?
Okay.
Can we touch upon Joe Biden? Because age is a great concern, isn't it, for voters in the US? And people will be thinking, first of all, is this the very best that the Democrats can offer? And secondly, they'll be concerned about if he wins this second term, he'll be 86 years old.
Yeah, he'll be 82 when he takes office, and he'll be 86 when he finishes. You're absolutely right. But I'm going to put a quote by a guy named Ronald Reagan. You remember him back in 1984 when he ran against Walter Mondale, when he was in his late 70s, a bit younger than Joe Biden. But he said, I know age is going to be an issue in this campaign, but I'm not going to make a big deal about my opponent's inexperience. The fact of the point here is that you've got politicians here. You've got politicians. Well, the Queen was 96 and was still ruling this country. The question is not a number. The question is the person in charge still mentally and physically able to run the country, to exude that confidence that America needs, and to set a good tone in terms of character, decency, and tolerance? That will have to be a choice for voters. But the fact is that Joe Biden, who has been in his late 70s in his first term, has presided over an administration which has passed the most extensive domestic legislation, infrastructure, the economy, green energy, dealing with coronavirus, the most extensive legislation that the U.S. has had since the 1960s, and he has done it with some Republican support.
OK, Professor Scott Lucas, thank you very much for your input this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
So it's got to be said, he wasn't much of a fan of DeSantis. He very much liked Joe Biden. It's worth pointing out that the culture war stuff that DeSantis, as it's labelled there by Professor Lucas, has gone down very well in Florida, where DeSantis is the governor. He's got critical race theory out of schools, the Disney organisation based in Florida, pushing the trans agenda on children. He kind of went to war with Disney. It actually played out very, very well with voters in Florida, which, of course, is the big red state. So I think to say it's a culture war that's non-existent is a bit harsh.
Yeah.
He's responding to stuff that's happening, and it's going down well.
But it's not playing out in the polls as of yet.
No, it's not.
It's trailing behind Trump.
But who can stop the Trump train? It seems like nobody.
That's it. Let us know what you think of that story or any of the stories that we're talking about today. gbnews@gbnews.com. But do stay with us, because up next, all the latest news and views from today's newspapers. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Welcome back. It's 6:42 on this Sunday morning. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And let's take a look at today's front pages for you now. And on the front of the Sunday Telegraph this morning, the PM is planning a 2p in the pound tax giveaway before the next election.
And Labour are launching a class war on Middle Britain, says the Mail on Sunday. The better-offs' access to GPs, libraries and even bin collections could be cut off.
The Sunday People say the Sunaks have no class after it was revealed they'd given a US college £2.5 million whilst British schools crumble.
OK, it's time to go through the papers inside now. And joining us this morning is political strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTernan, and journalist and author and friend of GB News, Ella Whelan. Good morning to both of you. Shall we kick off with that People front page? Sunak gave £2.5 million to a US college. They're having a pop because he's not giving stuff to British schools. Tell us about this story.
Yeah, complete with the kind of, the 1,000 or however much it was pound loafer wearing and all the rest of the antics that Rishi Sunak gets up with. I just don't understand why the guy keeps doing this. So 3 years into being a British MP for Richmond and North Yorkshire, he and his wife gave $3 million to US college Claremont McKenna in California, which is exceedingly wealthy college. I'd hazard a guess at saying it probably didn't need the £3 million from somebody who was going to later become a British Prime Minister. And for their very generous gift, they have been granted a plaque. So they're one of the labs, the Murty Sunak Quantitative and Computing Lab, it's got the names of the Prime Minister's wife on it.
It's worth bearing in mind that that's the college she attended.
Yes.
So it's not just like a random
No.
It's almost like a thank you. So is it in that sense?
But it's a different life, isn't it? That's the thing. It's a different life from the life normal British people are, the people watching this show this morning. Having that kind of money, Rishi Sunak and his wife are the richest couple ever to live in number 10, sometimes depending on the valuation of their what they own. They're richer than the king, and I think it means you're probably out of touch. You probably are different. Yes, giving $2 million to this college is generous, but it's a small amount of money for those people. But for most viewers, that's more than they'll earn in a lifetime.
I think it's not. It's the wealthy stuff is. I think it leads to. We all remember the fact that he couldn't pay with contactless. He keeps making a fool out of himself. But I think the more important thing is that, remember when it was revealed that he had a green card, that he is, I think in particular, Sunak and his wife are an example of the kind of, I don't know what phrase you'd use, global elite or sort of people who want to be known as having a legacy in different countries. And if you are a British Prime Minister, all your stakes are meant to be in the country that you are in charge of. And this, the fact that he did this while he was an MP, or, him and his wife did this while he was an MP, I think would make some people question, his priorities. And obviously the Sunday People goes into a great amount of detail, the fact that a school in his constituency can't afford enough computers for each child to work at the same time. And they're trying to have a fundraiser. And when they asked him to come, he said, no, I can't. So it just does not look good for the guy.
The optics aren't good, are they? Especially if you look at universities in this country. They are in dire straits. I mean, there is a funding crisis.
Yeah.
We're talking about it a lot at the moment with the international student issue. I mean, they essentially subsidise British students going to university, and then you've got the Prime Minister handing £2.5 million for US universities. It doesn't look.
It's a different way of living, isn't it? It doesn't look or smell good.
I sometimes wonder if being wealthy in Britain is seen as an attack point, whereas, for example, if you're wealthy in another country, it's seen as a sign of success. That's just me.
What do you think of that then, Martin?
I think that if you went to a university, as she did, and she's very grateful for the start it gave her in life, it's their decision to do what they want with their money. And to protract it back to a British school in his constituency, I think is a classic and obvious political attack line.
But I think if you become a politician and you are wealthy and your household is wealthy, then you have to understand that will be a political. I mean, it's a political attack line because Rishi Sunak's chosen to be in politics. Had he stayed in business, nobody would care, and that's the issue. That he seems to want to have the standards of being a businessman applied to a man who is the Prime Minister. And it's where you get double standards that people go...
Tony Blair's earning millions and millions and millions.
He's not Prime Minister now.
Yeah, but...
He's not Prime Minister.
Nobody attacks him for that. The point is, it's like...
Well, no, actually, people did attack him for ages about that.
Why is success not allowed rather than an attack? That's all I'm saying. Anyway, there's another Sunak story you're doing now.
Exactly.
That's the front page of the Telegraph.
Yeah.
Tax cut coming. This is good news, surely, for taxpayers.
It's ridiculous. This is the man who's imposed on us the biggest tax burden since the 50s, maybe even since the 40s. And the plan is to try and make us forget cost of living, to try and make us forget the burden of the creep of the income tax brackets by some flashy promise of a tax cut after the election. This won't be a tax cut before the election. This will be a tax cut announced in a budget, which will come into... And it's on dodgy money. They don't have enough money to give schools computers, and yet there's an idea that we can have a tax giveaway to try to bribe their way back to some electoral recovery. It's a joke. It absolutely is a joke.
Every political party dangles tax carrots to get votes. Jeremy Corbyn threatened to wipe out tuition fees. Every political party in the history of time offers tax cuts before elections.
This government have the books. They know what the books are. So
No, they do. I think that an announcement like this is pretty obvious, the motivation behind it at a time when, the Conservatives, probably you would speculate, Sunak and Johnson are going at each other's throats, and it does not look edifying for, the voting public who are thinking this country is just so far, this government is so far up its own backside, who doesn't know what's going on. But the more the broader question for what it means for the economy is very depressing because, the Labour Party is guilty of this as well, but in particular this government thinks the only way to solve the economic hardship we have at the moment and the difficulties is by tinkering around with tax. Yeah. And we know that in, trying to, I've said this before on this programme, trying to deal with inflation at the moment, the way in which they're dealing it is like, it's like consulting tea leaves. There's nothing substantial to it. And the result is, you guys talking about having less in products and things like that, which is an annoying but small thing, right up to, basically every time someone opens their energy bill every month, you've no idea what it's going to be, whether it's going to skyrocket or whatever.
Yeah. On shrinkflation, have you two noticed, just coming off the papers for a second, although this is a story in the day...
Oh, everywhere. Every bag of crisps, my M&Ms. How many M&Ms do you get now? It's a smaller packet and there's fewer of them.
Yeah, chocolate I've definitely noticed. What about you, Ella?
Yeah, the bag of crisps I've noticed, but I'm on high alert because I've got very annoyed by the whole kind of less sugar and everything. So that's a whole different... that's a different government scheme, yes.
Yeah, the taste is changing too, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Very, very true. OK, Ella, let's have a look in the Sunday Times. The front page, Ukraine's new weapons plea to hit back at Putin.
Yes, so, I mean, the news on this is pretty clear that Ukraine is now saying that they're ready for the counter-offensive. It's been confusing for Sometimes some people say that is a considered plot to try and, or, you know, considered move to try and confuse Russia. But the deputy head of Zelensky's office and his chief foreign affairs advisor is quoted across the papers this morning as saying that we are ready, that this spring offensive is now going to be a summer offensive. They've been praised by US officials and other papers. But in the Times, he's really actually having a pop at the European Union and saying that they need to do more in relation to sanctions, that there still is this tension with the fact that Russia is able to make a lot of income on the basis of, you know, its energy deals. And he says in the Times it's high time again for the EU and the rest of the world to think if they're doing enough with sanctions. But interesting that he really goes to town on praising Britain. Britain is now one of the leading countries in showing real incentive and courage and how to bring victory to my country.
John, I'd like to bring you in at this point because one of the benefits of Brexit was the ability to be nimble. And is this not a case of the European Union got to sit 27 member states down? It takes so long to get their act together, whereas we are the second biggest donor after the USA. So Britain has more than pulled its weight, and the European Union is, meanwhile, just dragging their heels.
Look, it's a benefit of Britain being one of the biggest military powers in the world outside the US. I think that's a great thing. I don't think it's particularly a Brexit thing, but...
So as far as the notion of continuing to donate, one of the things on the agenda in America this week, of course, Rishi in Washington, is going to be, you know, buttressing, underlining more funds to Ukraine. Is that a good thing, or do you think the electorate have good reason to think, well, this is like a limitless amount of money? What about domestically?
Sure. To be honest, I think there's huge support for Ukraine in the UK. We've seen that with the welcoming of refugees and their settlement in lots of communities. So I think actually British people are willing to go over the long haul for Ukraine, because this isn't simply about Ukraine. It's actually, to be honest, it's about the future of Europe and whether we respond to aggression. OK, John, a front page I'd like to thrust your way now. The Mail on Sunday. Labour accused of declaring class war on Middle Britain. If only it was true. Starmer is after our wheelie bins. If only this was true. It's not a true story. I would love a class war on behalf of the working class. Would you? It's about time. It's about time the working class voice was heard stronger, don't you think? And the Labour Party, the party of the working class, should be representing them. The people who felt left behind. This is it's a modest suggestion. It's a power put into legislation by Gordon Brown that you should look at class-based discrimination in allocating resources, not simply look at sex, not simply look at race, look at class as well. That would be a good thing, but I reckon this isn't going to happen. We'll get the same thing, which is that the middle classes always win from local government. LTNs always in middle-class areas. The middle classes play local councils like a piano. Is the answer, though, to take services away from the middle class or just improve the services for the working class, so to speak? And by the way... we're going to end the cuts. You know that. Labour's going to end the cuts in local as I recall, John, Sir Keir Starmer wasn't too keen on listening to the working classes when they voted for Brexit. I digress. Ella, what about this? I mean, is there anything in this?
Yeah, well, the thing about, you know, John mentions LTNs and stuff, the problem with, I mean, I think it's a stretch at the moment, though, as much as I share his desire for a centering of working class politics. I think it's a stretch at this point to think that the Labour Party has much potential. I mean, I think Keir Starmer has been quite naked in his sort of desire to reframe the Labour Party as a party of middle-class centrism, which is fine if that's your cup of tea. It's not mine. But things like LTNs and local councils and the way in which, you know, you are absolutely right, they do get played by a piano like middle classes. I think the problem is a lack of democracy, which is that time after time, I live in Hackney, you know, they always are announcing that they're having consultations, never comes through my door, or I tell you they'd hear about it. And there is, you know, I don't want to quite allege that there's corruption, but there's certainly a lot of fiddling in relation to getting what the council wants, not necessarily listening to residents.
Yeah, we're going to have to call time there. There's going to be lots more to come in the next hour. Ella and John, fantastic kick-off to the papers this morning. Look forward to the next round.
We'll just share a few of your views this morning. We're talking about shrinkflation. Everyday items are getting less in the packets, but you're paying the same price. Lots of you getting in touch. Carol says Tassimo Costa coffee pods are a very good example. Used to be 8 in a packet, now you only get 6, but you pay the same price.
Yeah, a lot of people have been getting very annoyed about Lurpak butter, about the huge cost of it. Rachel Here is saying Lurpak butter from last week in Morrison's is now packed in 200-gram packs, down from 250 packs, and the price per gram still went up 20%.
Yeah, Andrew says we're being hoodwinked by food companies. However, on the plus side, it could help with the obesity crisis as we're all facing smaller portion sizes. That's an interesting point. And Karen makes the same point. She says the real benefit is that all of this shrinkflation is on junk food. We spend millions of pounds every year trying to educate people into eating better. Perhaps this forces people to eat less. Keep those views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. But do stay with us because up next, we're going to bring you more on Manchester City's FA Cup victory. This is Breakfast on GB News with Martin and Ellie.
Hello there, welcome to your Sunday morning weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst. Well, it's a bit of a chilly start out there, but it will become warm as that strong early June sunshine gets to work. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure continues to dominate the weather pattern, keeping it largely dry and settled, and that remains the case for much of next week, though some showers may start to creep nearer as we move towards next weekend. But for now, it's a bright start for many. We do have some low cloud across northeast Scotland running down some eastern parts of England, but this slowly lifts and breaks and burns back to the coast this morning. And then for the afternoon, most places sunny, some cloud bubbling up across Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland. An isolated light shower is possible, but plenty of sunshine to come. Temperatures reaching the mid-20s, 25 to 26 Celsius possible across western parts of Wales, but still always chilly down that eastern coast. Temperatures really struggling, 12, 13 degrees with that low cloud not too far away. And we can see that low cloud pushing back in through this evening into Monday morning, turning quite grey, drizzly to start the morning here, but clear skies holding on across the far west means a sunny start here. Temperatures dipping into single figures, but as soon as that sun begins to rise, temperatures will rise quite quickly. Grey start, though, across parts of the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland, and then this cloud will take its time to burn back through Monday morning, slower than it has done compared to the weekend, but it will lift and break. Perhaps some parts of East Anglia, eastern England is holding on to a bit more cloud, and it'll be chilly here once more. But further west, again, plenty of sunshine and temperatures reaching the mid-20s in one or two spots. And for the next few days, it stays very similar. Plenty of sunshine to come, particularly in the west, always more in the way of cloud in the east, and temperatures rising, getting towards the mid-20s for many of us.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
It's 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 4th of June. Coming up this morning.
And Manchester City are FA Cup winners, beating Manchester United 2-1 at Wembley yesterday with the fabulous treble on the horizon. Can anybody stop the mighty Blues?
A new code of practice for the police has come into effect, which promises to better protect freedom of speech. It ensures officers only record non-crime hate incidents when absolutely necessary.
And American presidential hopeful Ron DeSantis launched an attack on Joe Biden's leadership yesterday, telling supporters in South Carolina that the president's fall on a stage on Thursday summed up America's decline.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
Good morning. There was plenty of sunshine across the UK on Saturday. Will we see more of the same today? Join me a little later on for the morning weather.
Top of the morning on this sunny Sunday. I'm Martin Daubney.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Yeah, so this is a great story. We're going through the papers today. Page 9 of the Daily Mail. It's about the primal instincts of barbecues and how it brings out the inner caveman of women, of men, say women. So basically this is blokes like to do all the dirty work. They get covered in charcoal, chuck on the lighter fluid, get all kind of caveman about it. And that's men's favourite bit. 35% believe the combination of raw meats, fire and the open air brings out their inner caveman. And guess what, Ellie?
What?
The women, their partners, like that. They like the man being all primal. Perhaps a barbecue today is a way to bring a bit of spice back into the relationship.
Well, no, when I was saying, I think barbecues, and sorry if it's sweeping generalisation, but I think barbecue's the only time that men really, really enjoy cooking because it is that naked flame thing. Men are just, it's a caveman instinct. It must be, well, that's what that says. That you love to cook when there's barbecue involved. But it's the women. The women end up doing all the work because they go to the shops, they buy all the food, they do all the prep, they did the salads and the pasta salads and the buns and the buttering and everything, and you just stand there and flip a burger. And Andrew, Andrew agrees with me and says, men always take control of the barbecue, as you mentioned, with all the prep being done by their female partners, which is true.
Yeah.
But, he says, I am always concerned about undercooked chicken and burnt sausages, so I do actually prefer my partner to be in charge of the barbecue.
Yeah, and a good tip is to start the chicken off in the oven or the air fryer, because an air fryer is much cheaper than the oven. I've got my little meter at home now. No, the oven, it goes into the red, it annoys me. Air fry it first, then finish it on the barbie. And also, I think blokes like going out there, Ellie, because they have a little cheeky...
Have a beer, stay out of trouble. Yeah. And when the weather's nice like this, actually, who can blame them? It's quite nice to stand, isn't it, and cook. Get in touch with your views on that. Who does the barbecuing in your house? And is the responsibility divided equally between yourself and your other half, or do you find that one person does it all? Do let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Love it.
Now, Manchester City remain on course for a legendary treble after victory in the FA Cup final at Wembley.
Yeah, and Ilkay Gundogan, I said that wrong again. Gundogan scored twice. That is right.
I think that's right.
Before I said Gundogan, which is the Scottish
I changed it for
version.
you. It looks a bit...
Scored twice to give them victory over Manchester United, and largely one-sided affair, although, to be fair, United turned up and gave a really good account of themselves. Our reporter, Sophie Reaper, has the story.
One city, two teams. One red, one blue. An ancient rivalry played out in an FA Cup final for the very first time. Yesterday, tens of thousands of Manchester City and Manchester United fans made the pilgrimage to Wembley in order to support their teams. As the day wore on and kick-off drew ever closer, it was clear expectations were high.
100% trust in them. Too much trust in them. But we're going to beat them anyway, it's fine.
I'm quietly confident. I'm very confident, actually.
Derby matches are always a bit of a nightmare, but fingers crossed.
We're big underdogs and they're a hell of a team. They've done brilliantly. But I believe we can beat them today.
I've supported them for so long and it's our time now. It's just our time.
At 3 o'clock, the whistle blew and the game began. Within just 13 seconds, City's captain Ilkay Gundogan had smashed a volley into the back of the net. Not only did that give his side a near instantaneous lead, but it also broke the record for the fastest goal ever scored in an FA Cup final. After that, the United fans were forced to wait with bated breath for a response. And in the 33rd minute, their patience was rewarded when Bruno Fernandes took to the penalty spot and made it count. In the end, a second goal from City's captain clinched a win for the Manchester Blues.
I'm absolutely elated. 2 out of 3. We're going to do the treble. We're going to take it from them after a whole history of hurt.
We expected a tight game, but yeah, absolutely fantastic. Best day ever.
We deserved it. First goal, 13 seconds, 15 seconds. And I've just lost for words.
A disappointment for the United fans yesterday, but there were still some positives to be taken away.
I'm gutted, but I'm proud of him. I think they did really well.
I think we could do more tackling in this season. But in next season, we might get some new players to do better.
Overall, I think a good season, and next season, title challenge again.
It was 2 titans of the game that went head-to-head yesterday, but ultimately it was Pep Guardiola's Manchester City that came out victorious. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Manchester City. Oh no. Well, one man who was watching the game yesterday was sports broadcaster and journalist Aidan McGee. And Aidan, City were quick out the box, weren't they?
They certainly were, Ellie. I mean, look, if you're Man United and you're looking to quell the threat or repel the threat that Manchester City, one of the best sides in the world, or probably one of the best club sides ever, are going to throw at you, then you could do without conceding after 13 seconds. That was the fastest FA Cup final goal in history. You've had some really brisk contenders in the last 20 or 30 years as well. We had Roberto Di Matteo, which I think was 27, 28 seconds back in 1997 when Chelsea won the FA Cup, their first major trophy since 1970. Then you had, in 2009, Louis Saha gave Everton the lead after 22 seconds. So to halve that, or to nearly halve that to 13, and it was a great strike as well. I mean, they stood off him a little bit, but as you said in the last hour, United were left stunned. So to turn things round after that, to pull things round against a side like that, gain a foothold, get the equaliser, play pretty well. You know, Garnacho came on near the end, he changed things, didn't he? He started getting down the left channels, started posing a few questions at Man City. He showed a bit of fearlessness that you'd expect from a very young player. I thought was to their credit. But listen, this is Man United. They expect to win trophies. And they're not doing it at the moment.
The thing about it is they were 6-1 outsiders, 6-1 in a final. Only 2 teams on the pod.
I don't recall United at any time in their history going in as long as that in any final.
I think, to be fair to the Red Devils, they turned up, they gave a good account of themselves. And as you said, they almost nicked it. There was almost a dramatic equaliser right at the end when it hit the bar, got tipped over, went all the way to the wire.
Exactly. And look, I think their supporters are philosophical about it. You saw some of them being interviewed after the game, and they know they're not up to the mark that City are in. This is a decades worth of neglect from the Glazers. You know, they've not spent anything close to what City have spent. Jose Mourinho, when he was there, said that his biggest achievement, one of his biggest achievements as a manager, was getting Man United to second in 2018, I think it was, behind Manchester City. I mean, they were nowhere near the title race, but he said with the money we were spending compared to what City, commensurate to what City was spending, that was a really good achievement. So, you know, I think they understand it, but it's been good progress from last season. I mean, I do think that from where they were, it wasn't that difficult to improve on what they were doing this time last year. But nonetheless, won the Carabao Cup. They've got to an FA Cup final. They've secured Champions League football for another season. It could have been worse.
And also a bright future for both teams. Obviously, City are about to go and do that historic treble. You think they're going to nick that?
Well, more than nick it, I think they'll comfortably beat Inter Milan next week in Istanbul. It's such a huge incentive for them to do it. It puts them on the map globally. And that's what these clubs want to do. I was in America with them, City, in 2000. I was in South Africa with them in 2009. And I was in New York with him in 2010. A lot of the locals didn't know who the hell they were. They thought they got confused with Man United. And it didn't help Man United were in the same city on a different tour. But now when they go around the world, they don't have that problem. They have to build their brand around the world. You do that by going abroad in the summer, and you do it by winning the Champions League. But it's not too shabby for United either. They've got this $5 billion Qatari takeover deal in the pipeline. If that goes through... If it happens, I mean, Sky tried to interview the Glazers yesterday, saying whose bid are you going to take? They got the Glazer going through the mix zone yesterday. He refused to comment, as you might expect. But, I mean, look, the fans want the Qatari bid to go through because that eliminates the prospects of the Glazers staying on the Ineos Radcliffe group. They want to keep the Glazers there, and I don't think the fans want that.
Aidan, we've got to ask you about the arrest at the match yesterday. Somebody wearing a very offensive Manchester United shirt. Tell us a bit more about that.
Disgusting. That was my overriding feeling last night. In fact, Ellie, I saw it. I don't know about what you thought, but I thought that can't be real. That's been mocked up. We can see pictures now for the benefit of our radio listeners. There's the words "not enough," and beneath that is 97, which denotes the number of people who died at the Hillsborough Stadium tragedy back in 1989, which is still politically loaded. And listen, don't get me wrong, there's been a history over the last 20 or 30 years, even longer, of tragedy chanting. You know, it's gone Liverpool's way, it's gone United's way. Leeds United have had one of their own. Glasgow Rangers, 1970 Highbox crash as well. They've had They've had barbs directed their way over the years. So it's not a new thing. But I've never seen someone, especially in the modern era, go to the trouble of buying a Man United shirt, which is probably going to cost you about 50 quid, and then spending another 20 or 30 quid getting numbers and letters put on your back. The Met released a statement last night saying that they coordinated with Wembley officials to identify the perpetrator, and they've made an arrest for a public order offence.
And it's interesting, we're about to, after this item, talk to a former Scotland Yard detective about his view. I think it's very, very interesting because that guy was arrested. I think that was the right thing to do. Yeah. Not only because it was offensive, but for his own safety. It's just astonishing that somebody would be that stupid.
Wear it to a football stadium as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I don't think he's among the Man United fans. He would have taken some abuse for that among his own fans. United fans are appalled by that. You know,
well, it would unite the fans, would it not? Man City and Man United. They'd be appalled.
Yeah, without doubt, because City are obviously based in that area as well, and they have a bit of a checkered history with Liverpool in recent times. They've had coaches attacked, but I think that most fans can see, decent people can see that's totally out of order. Yeah. And I hope he gets dealt with in the strongest terms.
Yeah. Celtic manager off to Tottenham.
Looks like it. Yeah. I mean, look, they've won the treble yesterday. That was the only trophy in Scotland he hadn't won. He's only been there 2 years, but he's a big character. He's 57 years old, so he's not a young kid. Out of the blocks and fresh going into Tottenham, but I think Tottenham are going to make that approach now. They're without a director of football. Tottenham are without a manager. They're not sure whether Harry Kane's going to stay. They drifted out the top four in the last 2 months since Antonio Conte gone, went there. Now, it's a bigger version of what Celtic were 2 years ago. They had a similar cliff edge ending when Neil Lennon was briefly in charge and Rangers won the title there for the first time in 9 years or 10 years, whatever it was. And so, Ange Postecoglou on a bigger scale. And I say bigger scale, I don't think Tottenham are a bigger club than Celtic, but they're in a bigger league and there's more financial wherewithal there. There's more pressure as well. I think he could go in there and possibly, with his personality, lift Tottenham up by the bootstraps. That's certainly what they're hoping to do. He was very coy in his future at the end of the game yesterday after winning that match, but I think you'll see him at Tottenham in the next week or so. Yeah,
quick bit about the Epsom derby, of course. Good to see the Animal Rising mob didn't cause too much of a disruption. A nice rugby tackle, took one onto the ground. Why can't we see that with Just Stop Oil? Well policed, well stewarded.
There were actually preemptive arrests in the morning, so they actually went to some of the homes of the perpetrators, knowing that they might cause some trouble later on, and tackled the problem, pardon the pun, tackled the problem at source. We saw 19 arrests, I think, on the day, 30 if you include the preemptive arrests, and as you say, a rugby tackle. Disappointment for Frankie Dettori finishing 12th on a horse called Arrest, funnily enough. But that was actually the favourite. But look, I mean, he's done more than enough in his career to see that final race being besmirching his career.
And finally, Aidan, before we let you go, I think we've got a graphic now of the shrinkflation story that we've been talking about all day. It's in the Daily Mail. Essentially, we're all paying more for our everyday items, but we're getting less in the packets. And you've noticed this, haven't you?
I knew a girl who worked for Mondelez, the Spanish company who owned Cadbury's, and she said this has been going on for 20 years. She said it's been shrinking gradually. I mean, a Snickers now, which I tend to have a treat myself once a week to a Snickers, they're basically the size of what a fun-size one was back in the early 90s, isn't it?
But are you actually telling us that this is part of this insidious move as a part of their strategy?
Well, of course it is, because I'll tell you what no one considers. They want to show that their bars are worth under a certain number of calories. Yeah. You can only really do that. You can remove some of the sugar, but it won't taste the same. You've got to reduce the content, the size. Quality Street is a good example. I mean, the actual drum that you used to get, I mean, these were individual sweets, I suppose. It's not the same as like an individual bar, but the actual drum is significantly bigger when I was a kid than it is now, and I monitor these sort of things.
Is that
closely.
true, or were you smaller?
I was just greedy, I think. Well, that's the problem. No, but I'm diabetic now, which I wasn't back then. I used to eat a lot more chocolate back in those days. But there's a trend. It's been going that way over 20 years. I mean, you think about how the volume they sell, they save significant amounts of production costs if they reduce it. But yeah, I knew someone from Mondelez who said that. And she used to provide me with Cadbury's goodies on a daily basis.
Well, Aidan McGee, as well as being a font of knowledge on football, you've now lifted the lid, literally, on the shocking manipulation of portion sizes by the chocolate giants.
Thanks, Aidan.
Good to see you. See you next time.
Yeah, do get in touch with us about what you've noticed in terms of shrinkflation. What items are you paying the same price for, but you're getting less of in the shops? GBnews at gbnews.com. Now, let's bring you up to date with some other stories that are taking place today.
And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has vowed to punish those responsible for India's worst rail disaster for decades. At least 288 people have been killed and around 850 injured in the accident in the eastern state of Odisha. 3 trains were involved, 2 passenger trains collided when one derailed, and both then crashed into a goods train.
More than 2,600 NHS staff in Scotland have taken time off work due to long COVID, with some off sick for more than 2 years. That's according to Freedom of Information requests by the Scottish Liberal Democrats. The Scottish Government says it's investing £10 million into the long COVID support fund.
And meteorologists say there is a small chance the temperature could reach 26 degrees Celsius today, making it the hottest day of the year so far. It will be the warmest somewhere in the west, parts of Wales, maybe southwest England too. And the Met Office says the dry weather is expected to continue into next week. Hurrah!
The Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court tomorrow to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror over alleged unlawful information gathering. Harry claims around 150 published articles contained information gathered using unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. And don't forget, here at GB News, we're going to be covering Prince Harry in the High Court throughout the day, starting from tomorrow. It's going to be box office stuff.
So a new code of practice for the police came into effect yesterday that will protect freedom of speech by ensuring officers record non-crime hate incidents only when absolutely necessary.
Yes, the new code of practice will safeguard people's fundamental right to freedom of expression, protect their personal data and ensure that non-crime hate incidents are not recorded when someone is merely offended.
For more on this, we're joined now by former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Good morning to you, Peter. No doubt you will think this is a long overdue return to common sense. Why on earth are police spending so much time policing our tweets when they should be policing our streets?
Indeed I do, and credit where it's due to the Home Secretary. Back in March, she said she wanted to create clarity over non-crime hate incidents, and 3 months later we have this code of conduct now, which came into force yesterday. Very interestingly, with reference to your earlier article about that abominable shirt that somebody was wearing at football yesterday, one of the expressions used in this code of conduct is intentionally hostile, and I think that fits very nicely with regards to that incident.
So you think it was correct that that gentleman was arrested? Because it is so interesting, isn't it? As you say, that law came into effect yesterday, and it's the same time, almost, when that man was wearing such an offensive shirt.
Undoubtedly, and I very much doubt if that coward would have had the courage or the stupidity to wear that shirt around the streets of Liverpool. I think perhaps summary justice, which I could never condone, might have found its way in his direction. But yes, the police have got themselves in a tangle over non-crime hate incidents, by and large around people that might be preaching, who have beliefs, faiths that they firmly adhere to, and they choose to spread it. But of course, it can be particularly offensive to many other people. And only the other day, I was in Oxford Street in central London, and there was somebody preaching what they truly believe. And to me, it was particularly hateful. But the question is it a crime? Should that person be dragged off the streets and thrown in a cell? And should it be recorded as a crime? And I think the answer in that instance was probably no.
Yeah, Peter, you know, non-crime hate incidents, they started out with good intent, didn't they? They were introduced after the Stephen Lawrence murder, tracing hate around race, around ethnicity, around your sexual orientation. But then the trans movement came in, and then social media, more to the point, emerged. And it really became a Pandora's box for the perceived offence of somebody became a police matter. It was nonsense, wasn't it?
It was, and then somebody, again, very stupidly, took a symbol which was previously linked to hatred and put pride colours on it, posted it on social media and found themselves being arrested. Unfortunately, there are no levels to some people's stupidity. And of course, it's not a crime to be stupid. If it was, we simply couldn't build enough jails. But I'm sure the police will welcome this code of conduct, and I hope it gives them some clarity. I think there's going to be bumps in the road, as there always is with new codes of practice and new laws, as people try and push the boundaries and the police try and establish through the courts exactly what is a crime and what isn't. But as I mentioned earlier, credit to the Home Secretary for just 3 months later bringing this code of practice into force.
Really interesting time for policing, isn't it, Peter? Because it seems as though we are re-examining the perimeters of policing at the moment. We're talking about mental health call-outs just a week or two ago, and that the police will no longer be responding to those from September. And now we're talking about not dealing with essentially offensive comments on Twitter. We're going to get back to police officers fighting crime and being bobbies on the beat once again.
Well, that is something that I've called for a very long time. And if this is part of a sea change, shall we say, whereby the police are going to concentrate on their core job, and that really is, number one, as I see it, keeping the streets safe. So I would like to see police officers patrolling the streets, something that was surrendered many years ago. Secondly, if crime is committed, crime as laid down by the laws of the land, as opposed to what people perceive to be crime. If crime is committed, can our police promptly and properly investigate it so that victims get the service that they deserve? And then thirdly, can we lock bad people up? Because that's what we want. I know there's a problem with the prison population and our prisons bursting at the seams, but that's a matter for the Department of Justice. It's the police's job to arrest people, and I think all well-meaning, well-intentioned, right-thinking people would like to see bad people locked up.
Yeah, Peter, I can hear the nation raising their coffee and tea mugs to you and saying, cheers, mate, because you're speaking absolute common sense here. 30,000 muggings went unsolved last year, 6% of burglaries solved, 120,000 of these non-crime hate incidents have been recorded at least. Would you like to see those things struck off people's records? Because don't forget, that can go on your background check and it can affect your ability to get a job.
Yes, it can. I'd like to see common sense applied to policing here, because really that is the most important thing that a police officer can possess. Common sense, courage, and the ability to look round the corner, to anticipate what might come next. And common sense policing would be welcomed, I'm sure, the length and breadth of the country. Let's focus on people committing crimes, as we all know. Everybody knows what a crime is. It's just that the police got themselves in a bit of a tangle in recent years. And let's find those perpetrators. Let's reinvent policing to a certain extent, because patrolling the streets is something that hasn't been done for many, many years. And I understand why it became a thing of the past, but it can be reinvented. Unfortunately, we've got a breed of senior police officers who have been highly educated in universities, and quite honestly, they came back to policing with their heads full of a lot of pseudo-intellectual claptrap, to be honest with you. But basic policing, patrolling the streets and creating a hostile environment for bad people, and creating that sense of fear that they might just come round the corner after committing a crime and bump into a police officer. That was a really powerful thing in years gone by. So if we can get some of the cops out of the cars, I know they've got a lot of 999 calls to go to, but if we can properly apply the resources so that police officers patrol the streets. They're known to their local community. Moreover, they know who the troublemakers and the criminals are. Then I think that would be a really good thing.
You know, Peter Blexley, if I could reach through the screen now and shake your hand, mate, I honestly would. Thank you for just speaking such common sense. And that's exactly what people want to be hearing. Get from behind your desk, get out, solve some crimes, lock up some bad guys. Peter, fantastic. Top of the morning to you. Thank you.
I think that's going to be really popular with you as well, watching and listening at home. Do let us know what you think of that story. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Love it. OK, moving on now. The editor of ITV This Morning has spoken out about the disgraced departure of Philip Schofield from the programme.
Yes, Martin Frizzell has said to read between the lines amid accusations of a toxic work environment at ITV, adding he thinks that scores are being settled.
Well, let's speak to Showbiz reporter who's been very busy on this story, Stephanie Techi. So the plot thickens. There's an inquiry on Wednesday. The sensible thing to have done might have been to keep stum. And, of course, that's what Martin Frizzell didn't do.
No, and he has a very air of confidence about him that ITV are probably going to come out of this unscathed. The pressure has been mounting all week. As he said in his interview, he said it's been 23 days of This Morning being on the front page of newspapers following Philip Schofield's scandal. And there's also, in the past week, we've seen accusations against him from, you know, Eamon Holmes, from Dr. Ranj Singh, who said that he voiced his complaints to the head of daytime at ITV, Emma Gormley, and said that he felt that there was a toxic environment. He was concerned about Martin's behaviour, all which ITV have said they've investigated and they found no evidence of. In Martin's interview, he talks about how he works with a team of females, mostly mums, who are worried about their jobs at ITV because of all this ongoing scandal. But he says they've got nothing to worry about. So this is a man who's quite confident that This Morning and ITV do not have an environment of toxicity or something which people will find offensive. But what I find quite interesting, in the Mail on Sunday today, they've spoken to people who've been there previously, and there was an ex-staffer, senior, who actually raised a case against Martin for sexism, but ITV at the time said they had found no evidence against that.
Similar, there was coverage in the Glamour magazine this week of a senior staffer, a female, who said that there was sexism at the root of ITV. So there has, as you say, been a number of allegations made, but they are coming out confident at the moment. Can we talk about Holly, please? Because she's back on This Morning tomorrow, expected to make a statement of some sort. How do you think that's going to go?
Well, I think Holly, again, she's been quite defiant that she's not stepping down from her role on This Morning. She knows her talent. She knows that there are some viewers who are still backing her, who still want the show to go on. So she is going to address it. But from what I've read, it's going to be quite emotional. It's going to be quite poignant. She's not going to kind of miss the elephant in the room, which is her fallout with Philip Schofield. So I think it's going to be very nail-biting stuff to watch. How viewers are going to perceive that, I don't know, because last night we had the British Soap Awards and there was actually protests against Philip Schofield and people were actually holding placards with Holly's face on it. So I don't know how the public is going to receive this.
You know, we've spoken about this all week. Do you think that people will be able to look at Holly without, in their minds, seeing Philip next to her, and therefore is her presence just keeping that lingering memory going, and it'd be more sensible to make a break? And another story on the front of the Mirror today, the BBC apparently been trying to woo Holly over there.
I think in terms of This Morning and Holly, I think it's going to take a while for people to get used to the new normal. She's going to have co-presenters Josie Gibson, Craig Doyle by her side. So I think viewers are going to have to take time to get used to that. But I think some people have said she hasn't been loyal to Philip in his hour of need. And he said, you know, he's tried to reach out to her and she hasn't responded. And whether Holly's brand's been tarnished long-term, that's yet to be seen. And BBC bosses, you know, TV is quite competitive and Holly is the kind of nation sweetheart when it comes to TV. So BBC bosses have had conversations with her. If it doesn't work out at ITV, she does have a future waiting for her at the BBC.
OK, Stephanie Techi, really good to see you this morning. You're going to stay with us throughout the morning, aren't you? Brilliant stuff.
Yeah, story that's going to roll and roll. Anyway, more to come, including fresh words about AI technology having sinister intent.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. It's 7:33. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie. Still to come this morning.
The National Deaf Children's Society launches its Every Moment Counts campaign, aimed at improving early support for youngsters suffering with hearing loss.
And remember, please get in touch all the usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, Hollywood films such as The Terminator and Ex Machina have ingrained public concerns about artificial intelligence. That's according to the professional body for computing.
And people are unduly concerned about its abilities and should be instead learning how to use it to their benefit.
Well, it follows a letter released by the San Francisco-based Center for AI Safety, which warned the technology could wipe out humanity.
Well, let's speak now to the British Computer Society's Chief Executive, Rashik Parmar. Rashik, good morning to you. So the media likes to make out that everything is the end of the world, everything is an apocalypse. Is it really the case, or is AI, could it be our friend?
Well, you know, AI has tremendous value to give to society. You just think about what happened during the pandemic, and when there were millions of people contacting various contact centers to find out what they could do, what they couldn't do. AI was there helping them give the practical advice, make sense of the regulations that are constantly changing. And at the same time, we're using AI to help us address some of the biggest issues. To be able to find those vaccines, we wouldn't have found them without different forms of computing technology. And there were various forms of AI being used in the drug discovery exercise. And when I think about going forward, there's huge opportunity for us to be able to take this kind of technology and improve productivity. We can even use it to level up society if we can get the training of society correct. We can start to provide new pathways for people and make life much more worthwhile generally.
For people is the speed at which AI is evolving. They're aware of the benefits it can bring, especially in the health sector. I mean, it could be, telling us about diseases that we have way before a doctor might be able to catch it. So there are going to be huge benefits. There are, of course, potential dangers. But the fear, I think, is that how will we possibly regulate it if it's evolving at such speed? The way that we legislate in this country, it is laborious, it's time-consuming. It can take several months to have a law made. And by the time that that's actually put into place, the technology could have evolved tenfold.
Absolutely, and I don't think we can rely on regulation to do this for us. And part of what we're doing through the BCS is we're trying to provide practical guidance to the professionals that are building these technologies. We can only have confidence in those technologies if we have confidence in the people that are building them. And so we've built out frameworks like responsible computing, a practical set of guidance for anybody building these technologies to understand where you should go, where you shouldn't go, understand the kind of unintended consequences that you might need to be aware of. We need our professionals to really step up. And we talk about this in terms of 4 very simple things. We need our professionals to be competent. So they need to understand what they're doing. This is a very potent technology that we need to be stewarded in the right way. We need them to be ethical. So think about the ethics of what's happening here. As you mentioned there, the ability to be able to predict potential future disease is immense, right? Yeah. But how do we use that information ethically to make sure that people aren't being inadvertently sidelined or ending up in a very bad situation because of that insight from the AI? So we've got to apply very clear ethical rules. Again, we built those rules out. We also need our professionals to be accountable. Right? When we build a bridge, we expect the engineers to know how to build that bridge and make sure it's not going to fall down. It'll carry the traffic it's designed for. How do we make sure we do the same with the AI? How do we make sure that the professionals that are building that are actually held to account and don't just sort of slope off and say, it wasn't my fault, it's somebody else's fault? They need to be accountable. And at the same time, we need to make sure that the teams that are building those technologies are inclusive, because these systems need to be able to serve everybody. And unless we have inclusive teams building those kind of systems, we won't be able to have inclusive solutions. And that's really why from the work that we're doing through the 70,000 members, we're trying to build out that profession. I think the UK has a tremendous opportunity here to lead the world. The British Standards Institute is a world-renowned institute for a set of standards. We can lead the world by building trustworthy AI systems that are transparent, that really serve and solve the real problems, and give the society the trust that they need, that these systems are going to help them and make the world better for them.
OK, Rashik Palmer, thank you very much for that excellent overview there. What do you make of this, Ali? Because some people think it's going to be the end of the world. I think people have justifiable concerns about their jobs being replaced.
Yeah,
that's what I think people are more concerned about. Things like customer service, receptionists, accountants, salespeople. They're on the endangered list because of AI. And whereas, of course, caring professions very much say so. I think there's a big conversation about the future-proofness of your job. People are worried about that.
Yeah, I think it would make a lot of our lives easier in terms of the admin that we do day to day. A lot of it will be AI. You'll be able to use AI. It will make your lives easier. But as you say, jobs will be at threat because of this. And I do worry about, as we touched upon there, the speed at which this is all evolving. It's very difficult. There are, even creators of AI now, they say it's actually gone so far, they struggle to understand. all of the elements of the technology that they created in the first place. So it is a bit of a worry. Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com. But do stay with us, because up next we're going to be joined by Ella Whelan and John McTiernan to look through today's papers. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You are watching Breakfast with Martin and Ellie. We're going to go through the papers now with the former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTiernan, and journalist and author Ella Whelan. Good morning to you both. Great to have you with us. Ella, we'll start with you. And it's the story that's giving us a giggle this morning. Chat Up Lines being given the elbow.
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's a small survey by a dating site called Illicit Encounters, which I'm not sure many people are on, but anyway. But the results from this survey of how people are approaching dating, and in particular chat-up lines, found that only 1 in 5 18 to 24-year-olds have only ever chatted up someone in real life. So that most people, I think probably anecdotally and generally we can say we understand that this is true. There's a big move to dating sites, and there's a lot less of people meeting in bars, meeting in, dances, wherever it used to happen. That's kind of a bit of a thing of the past. And it's interesting to think about what that does to the world of dating, because obviously if you've never had to actually go up to someone physically, see the look on their face, try and read the body language, and take that big risk of literally crossing the bar, then you're probably going to have a different... You are going to have a different experience than simply sending a... You're sending a message on a dating app online is in a way, a very easy thing to do because you don't have to be met with the consequences. And if you get rejected, well, it's just like a text. It doesn't feel the same.
It's interesting, this, because I did a big men's mental health study into this, and relationships are like a key point of everyone's mental health. And if you have a good relationship, you tend to be happier. But it kept coming up from young lads that being rejected endlessly on the swipes was doing their heads in, because a small percentage of attractive men are getting all the attention, of course, and then that was hammering their self-confidence. And so when they go into those real-world environments, they were saying themselves, I feel helpless, I don't know what to do. And I think online dating has really changed that whole level of human interaction. I think possibly not for the better. What do you reckon, John? You're into online dating, chatting up?
I met my partner at university a very long time ago, so no, it's... look, I think there's social media, smartphones, online dating, they're all part of the same thing, which is there are lower and lower barriers to communicating. I remember, when I was at school learning to dance and going to, asking a girl for a dance was like a massive thing. And so, some of the barriers have been lowered massively. You can just have I see my sons when they were at school, had great relationships with girls. They just knew them well. They were friends. Sometimes they became girlfriends. But quite often they just stayed friends. And I think some of the relationships have been eased by technology, and some of them have been more complicated. I think that's just the way of the modern world. And it's this online dating app doesn't sound as if it's a really straightforward one, though, does it? Illicit?
No, the survey is weird. But I think the interesting thing is that, in a way, actually, the way we approach dating hasn't changed that much, which is, I think I can speak generally here, I think most women still, in heterosexual relationships anyway, most women still want to be the one that's approached. You still do want that, and certainly among my girlfriends anyway, you want that romance of, a little bit of a chase. You want there to be some kind of suspense to it, a bit of risk to it. But and that hasn't changed from, when people were crossing the dance floor, 30, 40 years ago. But the thing that's changed now is that we're also sending a message to young people, and in particular young men, that if you don't do it the right way, going along the right consent lines or whatever it is, then you are in danger of being described as a terrible person. And I just can't imagine the pressure that mounts on young people. I think actually, in a way, I'm sort of torn. I'm a bit of a fan of dating apps, even though, likewise, I'm too old for them. I think I met my husband before, and they were a thing. But I like the fact that you can have free and easy relationships. I also just want people to date, because I think there is a terrible. There's also sort of trends that have come up in other surveys that show that, in particular, Gen Z are sort of, in a way, anti-sex, anti-relationships, and. Please.
And loneliness is a terrible, terrible thing. And it's one of the things that's come up again and again, hasn't it? In looking back over the last 4 or 5 years, lots higher rates of loneliness, and some of it exacerbated by the pandemic and the lockdown.
Yeah. OK, John, let's go to the Mail now, shall we? You've got a story about girl power.
Yeah, the girl power behind Starmer. It's a great piece by Dan Hodges, which is profiling a lot of the women behind and around Keir Starmer, some of whom you've heard of, like Angie Rayner and Rachel Reeves, very powerful women at the centre politically. Other people you've heard of but don't know much more about, like Sue Gray, Deborah Mattinson is pollster, and then some real stars, friends of mine, Jill Cuthbertson, who she's the gatekeeper. She's the one who lets you in or out the diary. She runs the office, the head of the office, the director of his office. And Steph Driver, who's the head of comms, and she's a really brilliant head of comms, and one of the reasons you know she is no one's ever heard of her. Because once you get known and named as a comms, you become the personality in politics, and actually you shouldn't be the personality, your person should be.
Isn't the key word here, though, John, the women behind Keir Starmer? Because Labour have never had a female leader.
Well, we've had 2 female leaders. We've had Margaret Beckett and Harriet Harman, because there's no such position in the Labour Party as acting leader. So we've had 2 female leaders.
Come on. There hasn't been an official Labour leader.
No, they were. When the leader dies or is unavailable, resigns, the deputy leader becomes the leader. But look, Labour's got a great tradition of transforming its opponents. We've made the Tory party into a much more diverse, a much more gender-balanced party in the Parliament, in the House of Commons than it was before.
Are you gnashing your teeth there?
Well, it's just that I've never had any truck with discussions about the identity of politicians, whether it's kind of the Conservatives who keep saying we've got the most diverse cabinet, blah, blah, blah, to this kind of, in the case of the Labour Party, slightly irritating discussion about women, seen as they have had such bad trouble in the recent past talking about women and women's issues in relation to the gender.
Or what is a woman?
Yeah, but the question I'd ask the Labour Party is, OK, if you've got all these ladies behind the scenes doing the job, where are your policies? Where are your policies on childcare? Where are your policies on abortion rights? Where, all these things that affect women? And for both parties, as much as they bleat about diversity, and particularly when it comes to women, in actual fact, the women at home voters that we don't very often see any kind of bang for our buck in terms of the amount of skirt that's in Parliament.
Yeah, far from me to cut a woman short. I'm afraid we have to move on. We spoke so long about dating. We only did 2 stories, but you're back in the next hour. Ella Whelan and John McTurner, thank you. Excellent news review. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both. Thank you.
OK, moving on now. 2/3 of deaf primary school children in England aren't reaching expected developmental, hard to say, milestones, says a new report.
So to try and combat these statistics, a leading charity is launching a fresh campaign to increase support during those critical first years.
Let's speak to the Chief Executive of the National Deaf Children's Society, Susan Daniels, OBE, who can tell us more about the Every Moment Counts campaign. So a very good morning to you. Tell us more about this magnificent campaign.
Good morning. So the campaign Every Moment Counts, which has been launched by the National Deaf Children's Society, we're trying to address the shocking statistics whereby we can see that deaf children are getting to the end of reception without having reached the relevant developmental milestones. And parents desperately need proper support. So over half are telling us that they are left just to navigate the system on their own without proper support. And that's why the National Deaf Children's Society is looking to make sure that deaf children get the very best possible support from the very beginning. We very much hope that the government will support this by putting in 200 more teachers of the deaf.
And Susan, what difference does it make to a deaf child to have a qualified teacher of the deaf? What difference does it make to their experience in those critical first years?
Yeah, so the teacher of the deaf played a really important role in supporting not just the child, but the family. So they go into the family's home and they support them to develop language and communication with their child, because 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents and they have no previous experience of deafness or having a deaf child. So the teacher of the deaf role is crucial in supporting the family and supporting them to develop the language and communication of their child, whether that be through sign language, spoken language, or a mixture of both. But we've lost 1 in 5 teachers of the deaf since 2011, and we just need those 200 more teachers now.
And Susan, we're keeping you on screen here because you're lip reading us now, which is a fantastic and amazing skill to have. Can we talk about the effects during the pandemic when a lot of teachers were wearing masks in classrooms, and so therefore deaf children were having a hard time because they couldn't see a teacher speaking to them. They fell behind, didn't they?
Yes, it was a really difficult time for deaf children because, as you say, they couldn't lip read when teachers were wearing opaque masks. So it was very challenging. For some children, they found that they were able to access the curriculum more easily and that schools did put the measures in place. But by and large, not just in school, but out in the street, talking to people, myself, I found that when I did meet people who were wearing masks, I had to ask them to take their masks down. Most people were quite accommodating, but indeed it was a very difficult time.
OK, Susan Daniels, really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much. Such an important topic to touch upon this morning. Thank you very much.
I find those sort of things really moving. I really do. Anyway, more to come, including the latest news on the FA Cup final. This is Breakfast on GB News with Martin and Ellie.
Hello there, welcome to your Sunday morning weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst. Well, it's a bit of a chilly start out there, but it will become warm as that strong early June sunshine gets to work. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure continues to dominate the weather pattern, keeping it largely dry and settled, and that remains the case for much of next week, though some showers may start to creep nearer as we move towards next weekend. But for now, it's a bright start for many. We do have some low cloud across northeast Scotland running down some eastern parts of England, but this slowly lifts and breaks and burns back to the coast this morning. And then for the afternoon, most places sunny, some cloud bubbling up across Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland. An isolated light shower is possible, but plenty of sunshine to come. Temperatures reaching the mid-20s, 25 to 26 Celsius possible across western parts of Wales, but still always chilly down that eastern coast. Temperatures really struggling, 12, 13 degrees with that low cloud not too far away. And we can see that low cloud pushing back in through this evening into Monday morning, turning quite grey, drizzly to start the morning here, but clear skies holding on across the far west means a sunny start here. Temperatures dipping into single figures, but as soon as that sun begins to rise, temperatures will rise quite quickly. Grey start, though, across parts of the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland, and then this cloud will take its time to burn back through Monday morning, slower than it has done compared to the weekend, but it will lift and break. Perhaps some parts of East Anglia, eastern England is holding on to a bit more cloud, and it'll be chilly here once more. But further west, again, plenty of sunshine and temperatures reaching the mid-20s in one or two spots. And for the next few days, it stays very similar. Plenty of sunshine to come, particularly in the west, always more in the way of cloud in the east, and temperatures rising, getting towards the mid-20s for many of us.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Sunday the 4th of June. Coming up for you this morning.
And Manchester City are FA Cup winners, beating Manchester United 2-1 at Wembley yesterday with a fabulous treble on the horizon. Can anybody stop the mighty Blues?
A new code of practice for the police has come into effect, aiming to better protect freedom of speech. It ensures officers only record non-crime hate incidents when absolutely necessary.
And American presidential hopeful Ron DeSantis launched an attack on Joe Biden's leadership yesterday, telling supporters in South Carolina that the president's fall on the stage on Thursday summed up America's decline.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
Good morning. There was plenty of sunshine across the UK on Saturday. Will we see more of the same today? Join me a little later on for the morning weather.
And top of the morning on this sunny Sunday, I'm Martin Daubney.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Now, of course, Manchester City now remain on course for a legendary treble after victory in the FA Cup final at Wembley yesterday. One man who was watching it was our very own Aidan McGee. Great performance from City. They were very quick out the box, weren't they?
Oh, they certainly were. I mean, 13 seconds. And if you're Man United and you're trying to repel City and their attack teams at will, then it doesn't help when you concede after 13 seconds. We've had some quite quick FA Cup final goals, actually, in the last 20, 30 years. We saw Roberto Di Matteo famously give Chelsea the lead against Middlesbrough in 97 on 27, 28 seconds, maybe 26 seconds. Louis Zaha did it for Everton back in 2009. I think it was 24 seconds. So to shave 11 seconds off that was some going yesterday. It was a decent hit, wasn't it, by Gundogan. He scored a second goal in the second half as well.
It did, yeah, but you did feel that United never really got over that early lash. I mean, he cannonballed it in the net and it shocked all the United players. Although, to be fair, they were 6-1 outsiders. I'd lost a few quid on that. But...
You're always losing a few quid on these bets.
I know, there's a common thing, ignore my bets. But they did turn up. They put a good performance in, and they almost equalised at the end.
They did. I mean, they got back into the... I mean, Jack Grealish's handball midway through the first half that allowed...
What do you reckon about that? I thought that was harsh, that penalty.
I think the handball rules on VAR in terms of penalties needs to be modified. We're led to believe that it will be streamlined a little bit next season, but it just sort of flicked his hand. Did it deny City a goal-scoring opportunity? Sorry, United a goal-scoring opportunity? Maybe, because we don't really know where the ball's going to land.
Well, I watched that with a bunch of Man United fans, and even they said,
really?
That was a lucky penny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Bruno Fernandes stepped up and dispatched it quite comfortably, and that made a bit of a game of it. But the second half, it was actually quite a similar goal that Gundogan scored, wasn't it? Yeah. But keeper was a bit unsighted. Yeah. The connection wasn't quite as true. But having said that, United fans are realistic. They're philosophical. They understand that they're up against a much better team. And I think coming out of that stadium yesterday, they'll be under the impression that, or be under no illusions that they're up against something quite special, a dynastic side, a team of generational talents who I believe are going to go on and win the Premier League. And when Garnacho came on towards the end, they asked some questions. I mean,
he was good.
You need some youth players sometimes, young players sometimes, to offer that, bring that little bit of fearlessness to the party, and I think that he got down the left-hand side a few times, he got into the box, City didn't really know what to do with him, and they could have forced a draw at the end, as you mentioned last hour.
Onto the treble. Is it going to happen?
Yeah, I think it will happen, I think it's into a decent, solid side. I think in most years they don't get to the Champions League final, but they've done it this year. But they've got players who were cast aside by Man City and United. Man City and Man United probably 6-7 years ago. Edin Dzeko won the Premier League title in 2012 with City, and it was discarded soon after. Henrik Mkhitaryan didn't make it at Man United under Mourinho, and that was in, 2016-17. And therefore, I don't really see how those players are going to lay a glove on a City side, which looks imperious at the moment. Don't forget they dispatched Real Madrid in the semi-final of the Champions League. They dispatched Liverpool 4-1 in the Premier League about, 2 months ago, whenever it was. And Man United 6-3 at the start of the season. So this is it's their time. It feels like their time. It really does.
Yep.
Got to ask you about the arrest that took place yesterday. A man wearing a very offensive football shirt. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, it was absolutely awful. I mean, I haven't seen anything like that before on a T-shirt. There have been examples of it since been pointed out a few in Scotland, funnily enough, on Twitter in the last half an hour or so. But yeah, for the benefit of our radio listeners, the number's 97, which denotes the number of people who died in the Hillsborough Stadium tragedy way back in 1989, and the words "not enough" above it. I mean, he's taken the trouble to go and buy a shirt, 50-odd quid, and spend another 20 or 30 quid on the numbers and the lettering. It really is quite disgusting. The Met released a statement last night, said they made an arrest. They'd been in talks with the Wembley officials. I believe Man United fans were involved in helping them track him down and identify him. And I think that's good. I really
we had Peter Blacksey on earlier, former Met copper.
He's keeping our shirt in the background.
I did, actually, yeah. I didn't want to sort of bring that, might traumatise him. But he said this was the right thing for the police to do. Because there's new freedom of speech laws coming in yesterday, and this is a great example of how there was an immediate danger and an escalation into real-world violence. So they said
intentional hostility.
That's it, intentional hostility. That was intentionally provoking, and therefore the arrest was the right thing to do.
Yeah, we can't assume that it's only Liverpool fans who'd be offended by that.
Yeah,
a lot of United fans would be.
Most people surely would be totally...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether they're going to lamp him or whether they're going to pose a physical threat to him is a different story, but it only takes one to do some damage. And 90,000 people yesterday.
Well, as a Forest fan, of course, that was a Nottingham Forest-Liverpool match.
Absolutely,
And Forest fans would be appalled by that.
Yeah,
I think any decent fan can unite just cretinous.
I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I didn't think it was real.
Yeah.
I thought it was a mock-up and someone causing mischief online, as you normally get.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Scottish Cup first.
Scottish Cup first of all,
There was another
Celtic
big
complete
match,
the treble. Ange Postecoglou, their Australian manager, he saw them over the line yesterday. The only trophy he hadn't won. They didn't win the Scottish Cup last year because Rangers beat them at the semi-final stage, I think it was. But he goes and completes the treble yesterday. It's the fifth time Celtic have done the treble in the last 7 seasons, so it's not as rare as the one that City and United did in '99 and City are trying to do in the next week or so. We've got pictures there of Celtic scoring. It's 3-1. They beat Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Fair props to Inverness actually, because they're in the second tier. It's rare that a second-tier tie would get into the Scottish Cup final there. So the story kind of moves on to their manager, Ange Postecoglou, who we mentioned. I think he's going to end up at Tottenham in the next week or so. He's very coy about his future at the end of the game. He was going around clapping and waving to supporters. There was a Celtic fan young Celtic fan holding up a placard saying, "Ange, please stay." And he'll be sadly missed because he really has dragged Celtic up by the bootstraps early in the last 2 years. They were going nowhere 2 years ago. When Neil Lennon was in there, it looked as if they were going to surrender their multiple titles to Rangers, but he stopped the rot straight away. He changed the mentality, brought in some players from Japan. It'll be a different assignment at Tottenham. Tottenham haven't got a director of football, they haven't got a manager, obviously, and they were in the top 4 2 months ago. They sacked Antonio Conte, they finished 7th or 8th or wherever it was, and they're in. I would argue that they're in disarray right now. They need a strong personality. He's young enough at 57 and experienced enough to go into a club like that and take a job like that. And it's actually quite good that a manager can work in other countries, he can go to Celtic and still end up with a top 6 Premier League job. But let's be clear, this is quite rare. The last time, I believe, a top 6 club in England took an old firm manager from either Rangers or Celtic was Graham Souness way back in 1991 after Kenny Dalglish walked out. I
don't suppose he'll ever struggle to get a beer bought for him in Glasgow, though. I mean, no, he's parting on very, very good terms.
Some managers just have that little common touch. Sometimes we've got a generation of clipboard managers now where, sometimes they're a little bit too technocratic, but he just seemed to, as well as being very proficient in terms of how he ran the team and signed players and recruited, etc., and managed up and managed down as managers have to do, he had a rapport with the supporters and they liked his personality, and he'll leave there with his head held high, as I expect will happen this week.
OK, quick bet on the Epsom derby, of course, yesterday. Not quite the Hollywood ending we expected for Frankie Dettori, and another 10 quid lost by me.
Yeah, I know. Well, at least we're talking about the actual sport.
Yeah.
Which is good. Because all yesterday we spoke about the build-up to it, the potential for unrest and protesting from Animal Rising. You know, the Jockey Club even got an injunction out of them and it didn't look like it was going to stop them. But, you know, Ellie and I discussed the National 2 or 3 months ago, or whenever it was, at Aintree. And again, it was all about problems away from the track, wasn't it? And just trying to stop how they're going to stop protesters getting on. So it was nice to see the sport taking precedence. Yesterday, Frankie Dettori, yes, finished 12th on a horse, funnily enough, named Arrest, but we did see eventually a win. There was a 66-1 shot was out in front. King of Steel till quite late, but it was a 92 shot. August rode in, ridden by Ryan Moore, trained by Aidan O'Brien. 9 wins now for Aidan O'Brien. That's a record extension there. So it was good to be talking about the sport in play, although there were some preemptive arrests yesterday. Yep. So 30 in total, including the preemptive arrests that were made at home and the 19 that were made near the trap. One person getting on nicely rugby tackle, by the way. Yeah, and I'd like to see a bit more of that. I'd like to see a bit more of that with the Just Stop Oil, but that's just me. Aidan McGee, thank you for that Good
update.
to see you this morning.
Splendid.
Thank you very much. Is that you done?
I think so, yeah. I'm going to go home to bed.
Well, last time we said this, then you turned up again. So.
I know, I was on the central line, wasn't I?
Oh, yeah, you
Did
were.
well to get a signal.
I don't know if you are back, actually.
No, I'm not.
I don't think you are. Well, thank you very much.
Off. Yeah, good to see you this weekend.
Thank you very much. OK, let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today.
And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has vowed to punish those responsible for India's worst rail disaster for decades. At least 288 people have been killed and around 850 injured in the accident in the eastern state of Odisha. 3 trains were involved, 2 passenger trains collided when one derailed and both then crashed into a goods train.
More than 2,600 NHS staff in Scotland have taken time off work due to long COVID, with some off sick for more than 2 years. That's according to Freedom of Information requests by the Scottish Liberal Democrats. The Scottish Government says it's investing £10 million into the Long COVID Support Fund.
And meteorologists say there is a small chance the temperature could reach 26 Celsius today, making it the hottest day of the year so far. It'll be the warmest somewhere in the west, parts of Wales, maybe southwest England also. And the Met Office say the dry weather is expected to continue into next week.
The Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court tomorrow to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mail over alleged unlawful information gathering. Prince Harry claims around 140 published articles contained information gathered using unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims.
And don't forget, here at GB News, we'll be covering Prince Harry in the High Court throughout the day, starting from tomorrow. Promises to be very dramatic stuff.
Right, this has got us talking this morning. This is in the Daily Mail, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, spotted by you, Martin. Shrinkflation.
Yeah, so basically this is the same price, but less stuff. So we're being ripped off, and they're trying to do it in an underhand manner. This sticks in my craw, because there's lots of stuff here that I like to tuck into and give my kids for their lunches at school, packed lunches, and we're being robbed blind, aren't we, Ellie?
Yeah, so Club Orange, which you really like, these chocolate biscuits over here, used to be 8 in a pack. Now there's 7, but you still pay the same price. This is something that gets on my wick. The Magnums up here used to be 4 in a pack. Now there's 3. And Dairy Milk Buttons used to be 240 grams, now down to 184 grams. 23% less buttons, fewer buttons in a bag.
Yeah, and I've got to say, an odd number of clubs is a big problem.
When you've
got 2 kids, there's 1 club left. Well, that's always for Daddy. So at least there is a winner. But a lot of people are getting in touch about this, Eddie. It's getting people going.
Yeah, it certainly is. Graham says the difference I've noticed most is crisps.
Yeah.
Same size packets, but a pathetic amount of crisps in the bottom of the bag.
And often, I think they kind of inflate them. So it's more fresh air in the bag than you can hear them rattling around. You're paying for fresh air.
They look full, don't they? But they're not. John says, what's happened to Curly Whirlies and Walnut Whips?
Oh, yeah.
They're a third of the size they used to be. I blame the EU and the food regulations they impose to police our diets and the battle on obesity.
See, even I couldn't get Brexit into chocolate. Well done. That takes some doing. That takes some doing. And, yeah, here is... Tony says, instead of shrinking the size of sweets and chocolates, why don't people take responsibility and just move more? So what he's saying is, because there's an obesity link. So one of the tenuous links, I think, Ellie, the manufacturers are saying, well, we're helping with the obesity crisis. No, you're not. We should decide our portion sizes, not you. If I want 8 clubs in one go, That's my business. It's not yours.
I'm paying for the goods, so I want to receive them. Alan says, I've always used Comfort fabric conditioner. When I last purchased it, I noticed the bottle has shrunk by just over half a litre. But it was £1 dearer than the last time I'd bought it. I also noticed the old bottle does 85 washes, the new one does 83. Well, very good you've been counting, Alan.
God, he's very meticulous.
Yes.
Two washes less. This is a really interesting one, that there's a chocolate war going on down under. Bill in Glasgow says, I can assure you that Mars bars are 1/3 bigger in Australia than in the UK. That's annoyed me. How come they get the best items?
Well, clearly, but not quite the same issue there. But do keep your views coming in on shrinkflation. It's got you talking this morning. Also, a view on policing, common sense policing. Bobby's back on the beat rather than tackling Twitter. Or tweets that,
we
that
talked
are
about this. We talked about this today because there are new laws in to allow freedom of speech, so less messing around on social media. And Jay says here, hurrah, bring back the village Bobby. When I was a kid, we had a village policeman. He knew everyone. He was always available. And us kids were terrified because he knew our parents. He was very proactive and no crime in the village that I could remember went unnoticed. That's the thing. People like that familiarity. They like to be able to tip their hat, say hello to a copper in the morning. I certainly do. And if the coppers are on the street, the bad guys know that they're there. It's a deterrent.
Yeah, and the visibility of police officers actually brings a lot of comfort to people, doesn't
100%, totally.
To know that it's there. Also, a few views saying that you've had it to the back teeth of hearing about Philip Schofield. Trust me, so have we. We've been covering this, but I think Stephanie said it was something like 23 days.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you why we have to do it. And it's because on every single front page today is something to do with Holly Willoughby or Philip Schofield. I mean, it is at the forefront of most of the newspapers today.
He's in Portugal there, sunning up, business as usual. Apparently there's going to be a big tearful speech on this morning, tomorrow when she returns. That's the front page of The Sun.
Yeah, it's on Sunday People as well. The BBC is plotting to poach Holly. Again, on the Sunday Express, Holly is pondering her next move. Ultimately, it is a hugely successful British show. It's all over the papers. It's dominating the news agenda, whether we like it or not. And we do talk about things that you are talking about. So that's why we're doing it. We will continue to try and make it very interesting for you. We've got a lovely Stephanie Tecci.
Yeah, she's been fantastic on it.
And has been doing a good job. But do keep your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com.
OK, on to our next story now. And as we just said, a new code of practice for the police came into effect yesterday that will protect freedom of speech by ensuring officers record non-crime hate incidents only when absolutely necessary.
Yes, the new code of practice will safeguard people's fundamental right to freedom of expression, protect their personal data and ensure that non-crime hate incidents are not recorded when someone is merely offended.
And this has to be a common-sense approach. For more on this, let's cross live to Bromley, where we're joined by our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Olivia, we spoke to Peter Blexley earlier, former Met copper, very, very supportive of this, the Bobby on the beat, because they will be spending much less time policing our tweets and out there policing our streets.
Yes, absolutely. Stamping out these non-crime hate speech is a huge step forwards for the government because coppers have been pretty fed up with wasting their time dealing with these incidents. And of course, it's very, very unpopular with the public. We know that a huge amount of very large percentage of phone thefts, for example, I think in London it's 96% of phone thefts go on, no arrest is ever made, and similar percentages in other parts of the country for burglary of the home. And part of the reason why officers simply don't have the time to investigate these instances is that some of their time is taken up with dealing with hate speech, which isn't, or comments online, which aren't actually crimes. So this is a big step forward. Another element that the new free speech laws will cover is freedom of speech in universities. So from now on, universities, which includes staff and students, will have a legal responsibility to make sure that their colleagues are allowed, or they have to give at least practical steps to make sure that their colleagues are allowed to have some sort of freedom of speech. So if you remember what Dr. Kathleen Stock, gender-critical feminist, she was hounded out of Sussex University in 2021 for holding gender-critical political views. And the new law, hopefully, will ensure that nothing like that can ever happen again. To try and strengthen that law, to toughen it up, the government have employed their first ever free speech czar, a man called Arif Ahmed, and the Conservative MPs I've spoken to, who are huge defenders of free speech, very enthusiastic defenders, have said that he is exactly the right man for the job. He will be there to make sure that anyone who breaches those free speech laws, any student or member of staff who refuses to give their colleague the right to express their opinions, he will make sure that they face sanctions. So it is a really, really big step forward for the government and shows that, you know, finally the Conservatives are putting their money where their mouth is on this issue.
Yes, absolutely. And as you say so rightly, Olivia, I was going to ask you about Kathleen Stock, because Rishi Sunak did come out in support of her, didn't he? So clearly this is something that the government feel very, very passionately about. And this is a very interesting time, isn't it, for policing, because it does seem as though we are testing the parameters of policing. We were talking about mental health call-outs, weren't we, just a week or two ago, and the police are no longer going to deal with mental health call-outs from September, and now we know that they're going to come away from policing Twitter and go back to that old school style of policing, which is fighting crime on the streets.
Absolutely. It seems as though recently there has been an acceptance that the remit of the police generally has just become too large. Policemen sitting up all night with patients who are clearly mentally ill, but because there isn't enough space for them in the local hospital, etc., a policeman is landed with that responsibility on top of their own very, very, very large duties. As you say, there are also these instances of Twitter conversations being policed by policemen instead of police being allowed to get on with their jobs. Another issue in policing that the government, we think, is likely to discuss over the coming year is the expanding remit of the Met Police. There is an argument, which is gaining ground in the Conservative Party at least, that the remit of the Met has just simply got too large. We have lost a lot of commissioners in the last 10 years. I think we've got through about 6 commissioners in the last 10 years. Almost all of them have resigned before their term has been up. And there is a theory that the Met has simply become ungovernable because it is too big. So it's all feeding into the same issue, that police have too much to do, and only by delegating some of those responsibilities elsewhere will we be able to reform the police, which, as we heard in the Casey report, has a lot of problems.
It's been in the background there. I hope you didn't say anything offensive, Olivia. 37,000 mental health call-outs, 30,000 muggings go unreported, 6% of burglaries even cleared up. I think this is a long overdue welcome return to common sense. Can we talk about Rishi Sunak? He's heading over to America on a bit of a charm offensive in Washington.
He is. He's heading over to talk to Joe Biden about strengthening economic ties with the US. I mean, it doesn't sound as though it's going to be as exciting as we might have hoped, because that free trade deal with the US, which many Brexiteers reported would be a big benefit of Brexit, it still feels like it's a long way from materialising. The conversation started in 2020 under Donald Trump. It seemed as though it was gaining some traction. It looked like we might be somewhere near to securing a free speech deal. But under Joe Biden, we seem to have regressed a little bit in those conversations. And it's now being reported that Rishi Sunak won't even be having a conversation with Joe Biden about the possibility of the free trade agreement with the US in this visit next week. But he will be talking about some more sort of informal ties, so perhaps lowering trade barriers with particular US states. They'll also be talking, of course, about how to keep up the support for Ukraine. So it'll be interesting to see where that lands. It'll be interesting to see if the US puts more pressure on Britain to do more. But at the moment, it seems to be Britain who is leading the pack there. So it could be this time the other way round. That's how the conversation is expected to go. But I don't think we can expect too many fireworks.
OK, Olivia, and just before we let you go, can you briefly tell us why you're in Bromley today?
I'm in Bromley because I'm hosting the People's Panel on Camilla Tominey's show. We're going to have 3 or 4 GB News viewers, and we're going to ask them their opinions on the biggest stories of the week, and they're going to get their chance to ask the politicians who Camilla is interviewing. They can ask them their questions. So it's always really fun and very nice to be in sunny Bromley today.
And the sun is out for you as well, Olivia. Enjoy it and enjoy the People's Panel as well. Brilliant stuff.
And I absolutely love those kind of things. You know, if you want to know what people are thinking about, don't ask politicians, go and ask people themselves. The people run this country. We lend our vote to politicians. Listen to the people, ignore them at your peril.
Yep, and that's coming up on Camilla Tominey's show in just over an hour's time. But do stay with us, because up next, Holly Willoughby is set to return to This Morning. Tomorrow, we'll have the latest with Stephanie Tecci. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:27 on this sunny Sunday. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie. And please remember to get in touch with us. The usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.com. On to our next story now. And the editor of ITV This Morning has spoken out about the disgraced departure of Philip Schofield from the programme.
Yes, Martin Frizzell has said to read between the lines amid accusations of a toxic work environment at ITV, adding he thinks the scores are being settled.
I think we know who he's referring to there. He normally sits right here. That's Eamon Holmes. And to speak about that is our showbiz reporter, the busiest woman on television, Stephanie Tecci. Steffi, shall we start with something that you just mentioned about, and that's why are we still talking about it? The answer is it's a huge news story.
And it's a developing story. I think what's happened over the past week, I know it's been like Philip Schofield overdose and ITV overdose as well, but each day there's always been a breaking news story to add to this, including yesterday with Martin Frizzell making the comments he did that where he feels like people who have accused a show of being toxic have scores to settle. But it's also a big week for This Morning. They've never seen such a big scandal like this in its whole 20-year history or plus history. So this week, tomorrow, we're going to see Holly back on the sofa after a 2-week break. There was a big question whether she was going to return. She is going to return. And now she's going to address the scandal with Philip Schofield. They've parted ways as friends, and also their on-screen partnership has come to an end. So I don't think it can be business as usual for Holly Willoughby, and she's going to have to address it, which she will. And reports saying it's quite an emotional statement which she's penned. It comes from the heart, because not only was Philip her co-host, he was also her dear friend, one of her best friends. But moving on from that, on Wednesday, now we're going to be seeing ITV executives having to answer about all these claims of the toxic behaviour, also addressing the affair with Philip Schofield and this young runner.
And the duty of care, the dereliction of that. I mean, this is a big story.
And it's bigger, as I said yesterday, it's going to be bigger than ITV. It's going to be looking at the media landscape and, you know, how employers are treating their employees. And when people do raise these concerns of abuse or discrimination, how they're being handled. I don't think we want to foster an industry where we're having the people, the likes of Jimmy Savile and those kind of cases being hidden for decades. It shouldn't be the case. For viewers at home, they don't want to hear about another Philip Schofield. So there has to be that time of reckoning and change in the industry.
And transparency is important to people as well. So do you think in that sense, Martin Frizzell's comments may be a little premature, bearing in mind we've still got the external investigation into the culture at ITV, and also the questioning of ITV execs by MPs. There's still a lot more to come.
Well, I think, you know, most people, most bosses in that situation, or broadcasters, will be very humble and they would be quite fearful of what can come out. So
no comment.
Yeah, no comment at all. So I've been quite surprised about Martin's approach, ITV's approach, but maybe because it's genuinely they feel like they do not have a toxic culture and they did not know about this affair between Philip Schofield and this young runner. So, you know, there's always three sides to a story and, you know, it's their side, you know, people who are making these accusations, and there's the truth.
And another reason we're talking about this again, you said there was a protest at the Soap Awards about this?
There was. The Soap Awards last night took place in Manchester. Philip Schofield had been presenting the awards for almost 13 years, so he was a regular at that award show. And even though he stepped down from it and it was presented by Jane MacDonald, there was a few protesters who turned up yesterday outside the venue who were holding, you know, banners with Holly's face on it, Philip's face on it. So there is still that public interest in this story, and still quite a few people who've been let down and feel quite angry at both of them still.
Well, clearly, and I mean, that leads into Holly's comeback tomorrow, sitting on the sofa. Will she be able to distance herself from Philip? Will she be able to present herself as this independent presenter? Or will it be like what we saw at the Soap Awards last night, when people will see Holly Willoughby and see Philip Schofield?
I think her brand has been tarnished from, you know, Q-Gate and now this with Philip. And, you know, also people are questioning her loyalty because, you know, if Philip is a dear friend and this week he said he's been close to feeling like he wants to end his life, people are saying you've left him at his darkest hour. But Holly has to go on. I'm sorry, like, Philip's enjoyed a 40-year-plus career in TV. Holly's still roughly, she's got many more years to go.
Yeah,
so,
how old is she, 40?
Yeah, so she's got many more years to go. BBC are calling, so there is that demand for Holly there.
I'm sure that everything she says will be very, very closely watched, least of all by you. Because don't forget, when Philip said, "My brother is dead" to me, it was like, wow.
Quite harsh.
Whatever she says, she has to distance herself from him now. Surely she has to come out and say, no, this is wrong. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just tantamount to endorsing what happened. So
the big thing, Martin, is people want to know, did you know about the affair? How much did you know? And she's going to have to talk about that because people are saying, you know, Philip is your right-hand man. How did you not know about this affair and all these accusations that have been building up?
Well, you better get some sleep, Steph,
I
because
am.
you're going to be absolutely
I'm not going to talk
flat out.
about Philip Schofield for the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Steph. You've been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. OK, and more to come, including all the other stories making the headlines in Sunday's newspapers with Ella and Peter. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back to Breakfast. It's 8:37. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And it's time to go through the papers now. And joining us this morning is political strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTiernan, and journalist and author Ella Whelan. Really good to see you both today. And Ella, let's start with you, shall we, in the Times, about AI.
Yes, so this is Sajid Javid writing about the fears that he has about the future of AI. Javid, a former Home Secretary and also a former advisor to an artificial intelligence firm in America. And it's quite a remarkable little piece, actually. He compares the dangers that AI might pose us with atomic warfare. He begins the article by quoting a speech by Eisenhower looking at atomic warfare, which I think probably is a little bit alarmist. But anyway, he goes on to talk about the fact that he's worried about what AI might do in the coming elections in America.
In terms of interference
in terms of, he says, in particularly in the UK, that we're just not set up for the challenges that AI, that he basically says we're still grappling with social media. Yeah. And he ends by asking for a kind of framework of accountability and ethical framework and something that gears AI towards a particular kind of set of goals. And he says that if we want to have an AI for peace, then we've got to intervene with regulation. Otherwise, he says, things don't end well if the AI revolution happens to us, not with us. It's an incredibly pessimistic take, I have to say, even though he does have a nod towards, obviously technology is a good thing, he says somewhere. But I think the panic about AI, it links, particularly from a Conservative politician at the moment, is linked in with a sort of panic around social media, the online safety bill, and this idea that if that technology uncontrolled by a government will do terrible things, rather than actually doing some exciting things and things that could, having some innovations that aren't hampered by oppressive ethical framework, fine, but sort of oppressive regulation can actually lead us to some exciting
And indeed,
places.
he's in America pitching for that precise role. He wants to be the international watchdog of AI globally.
Yes, this piece comes just directly under in the Times, a big spread on Sunak's trip to America. So there's no question behind why Javid is now coming out and talking about AI and flashing his credentials.
What do you make of it, John?
Look, AI is serious. We do have legislation already around copyright, around privacy, around ways we could... If it's as serious as nuclear weapons, we should be banning the private sector from developing it. We don't let the private sector just develop nuclear weapons. So people need to get serious about their analogies. It's a large language model. It means that what it produces is based on these papers, on what we've blogged. And at the moment, I'm not that scared of it. I'm scared of the hype, actually, more than anything else.
Fair point. Yeah, that there is a lot of kind of catastrophe being talked up around anything new. Yeah. I just figure, people I think should be more worried about AI replacing their jobs and their ability to work, rather than the world's going to end tomorrow.
Most of it, I think the biggest problem with AI at the moment is in education, with kids cheating on their coursework, which is a bad thing. We should care about that. We should deal with it. Not quite in the same league as atomic warfare.
But when Lotus Notes, when the first online accounting software came in, 400,000 accountants lost their jobs in America. 600,000 accountants got jobs because accountancy just changed. It changed from boring routine, moving numbers around, to being more imaginative about what you can do. So the thing is, can we apply AI to take over routine jobs that then we can do more actually interesting and imaginative and creative jobs.
A way of liberating us.
It should liberate people from being,
Look on the glass half full side.
I think we've always made technology make our lives better. And the question is, how do we harness this to make lives better? How do we find new drugs? How do we find all of those things that can actually make life better?
All right, John, moving on to a story of yours in The Sun. Baffling cop code. What's this?
It's the Met have produced a dictionary, a Bible of all of their acronyms. So, do you know what a piano is?
No.
Piano is a personal injury accident notification online. Or an MSN is a most significant nibble.
Nibble?
I know, nibble. Maybe it's a nibble of intelligence. Some of them are not AMI, apparent mental illness. I think the thing is, all organisations, I was in the MOD as an advisor, we had a gigantic thing too. All organisations have, we call them TLAs, three-letter acronyms. Lots and lots of acronyms and things to sum up everything. And it's there is an internal jargon of policing. There's meant to be one also in hospitals, NFN. Normal for Norfolk, and all the insulting ones that they use.
Are these things for brevity of thought, just to kind of streamline things, or is it actually more of a kind of code to lock people out, and is it confusing for the public?
I think it is meant to speed things up for communicating internally, but sometimes it can make you feel like an outsider, particularly when people from outside the profession are involved. Like, I think having this kind of thing it'll be available online. People will be able to look at it themselves. And so I hope that they've prepared themselves against anything that might seem unacceptable to normal sensibilities.
I mean, 2,000 terms, though, that's going to be difficult for any officer to get their head around, on top of everything else they've got on their plate.
Yeah.
Right, Ella, let's have a look in the Times, shall we? And Sunak's £1 billion plan to fix the NHS.
OK, the big thing to start any discussion about this to say is that this is all up in the air. So that it's a plan that is likely, it's not confirmed yet. It's not, most importantly, it's not funded yet, and it's the promise for the funding hasn't come out. But anyway, if it is to go ahead, there is a potential for a plan for doubling medical school places to 15,000 by 2028-29. You know, quite significant numbers, 24,000 nurses and midwives to be trained by 2030. Crucially, within those plans is that they would be, a lot of that would be apprenticeships. They'd be working on the job, so you'd be almost immediately in hospitals, in GP centres, working. At the moment, there's a bit of a problem with a lag because lots of places in healthcare require a degree, and so it takes years before you actually get into doing the job. The plan is that this might be announced by July the 5th, which is the 75th anniversary of the NHS, so there's a lot of kind of scrambling to try and tie bows and dot I's and cross T's. But there is this big question, and some of the people high up in the NHS are quoted in the Times here saying, well, if it's not fully funded, then we can't plan for it. There is a nervousness, with particularly Jeremy Hunt is nervous, the Chancellor, about basically planning into the budget years of funding because they want to have this wiggle room to do things like they've done.
The tax cut on the front page, the Telegraph, is it tax cuts or spending?
I think I'm delighted that we are moving to a place in discussions about the NHS where we understand that the system has to change, that, you know, degrees and apprenticeships have to change, that there needs to be more staff. But as always, there is still the question of just the cash and whether or not we have it.
John, it would seem a common sense thing to do. We are so reliant upon importing NHS staff from India, from the Philippines, to have homegrown talent to invest, hopefully with bursaries or even free.
I'm in favour of this free market of talent. If people in the Philippines want to spend their money on training their children to become nurses and doctors, then that saves our British taxpayer. I think it's great to us to bring labour, nursing and doctors' labour from all around the world. There's no problem with that at all. The issue here, and Ella put a finger on it, is the cost of this kind of investment in staff is gigantic. It's the training, and then it is the employing them. And the question of whether the health service will have the money to pay for any of these staff. You can train doctors and nurses if there's no places for them to go to that are paid for. I mean, then. But
I'm pretty sure, John. I mean, come on. I'm pretty sure that Keir Starmer's going to be chucking a load of money around towards the NHS. In ahead of any general election, every Labour Party...
We know how we'll fund our expenditure of training. It's by removing the loopholes for non-DOMs. So actually, we've got a policy which, and we know we've discussed it, the wealth of the non-DOM wife of the Prime Minister. We know there's loopholes to close. We close those. This is unfunded until the Tories say what tax they'll raise. But then, on the Sunday Telegraph, we discussed first thing, tax cuts are being promised. So which is it?
Well, John, maybe an answer is green levies. Onto your story next Sunday Telegraph. Green levies will be imposed for next year. They're increasing food prices, pushing shopping bills up by £4 billion a year.
See, of course they're not. This is just an attempt to make sure that we reduce plastics. We're all opposed to plastics in the environment, plastics that leach into water. The government's trying to reduce the use of plastics. The industry, the food industry, the supermarket industry has to reduce its reliance on plastic in the packaging. And the costs will only get passed on if industry doesn't change itself. Well, it should change itself because it makes a saving. It makes a saving, it's more environmentally sound. There needs to be no increase in costs for the consumers. We've got the most efficient supermarkets in Europe. I expect them to do this well, like they do most things.
OK.
OK, Ella, we've got time for one more story. So let's have a look at the front page of The Observer, shall we? And the stupid Sunak COVID scheme will be the focus of the inquiry.
Eat out to help out. Remember that?
Yes.
a great time, actually.
He'd had to spread out.
I took part in that
offer,
and I enjoyed it.
It was so much cheaper than eating at home at one point.
Yeah, well, talking about all this shrinkflation and stuff, I mean, those were the days. But this is actually a relatively petulant intervention from one of the people who was working in SAGE, Professor John Edmonds of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, who's, well, if I'm to be fair, he's making a point of saying that the government constantly said they were following the science. All we're doing is following the science. It was just reading from the Bible. In fact, he points out that they would give scientists would give evidence and whatever, but they would not be part of policy making. He's very cross with the fact that they would not be part of policy making. Obviously, as a Democrat, I'm rather glad that policy making was done by elected officials rather than unelected scientists, as much as they were essential, obviously, in dealing with the pandemic. But I think it's, he on the Eat Out to Help Out thing, he says that it helped in creating a vast spread of the infection. There is, debate about that. But it just opens an interesting discussion about, the way in which policy was made throughout the pandemic, which hopefully the inquiry will look into.
Yeah, thank you
over the
very
next
much.
10 years.
Yeah, Ella Wheeler and John McTurnan, we have to call it a day there. Yeah. In actual fact, the science is pretty clear. There was no big spike during Eat Out to Help Out, but that's just the facts, and sometimes they get in the way, even of scientists.
Thank
you,
John. Thank you, Ella. Very good to see you today. Now, Prince Harry is seen as a loose cannon by the royal family, whilst Meghan Markle appears set on destroying the institution.
Well, Tom Quinn explores the couple's plummeting popularity in the US in a new Channel 5 documentary.
Well, here to give us his view on that opinion is royal correspondent and writer Michael Cole. Good morning to you, Michael. Very good to see you. And is Meghan and Harry's... Good morning. And are Meghan and Harry's popularity really plummeting, do you think?
Well, on your behalf, I did watch this programme last night, and there was absolutely nothing in it apart from Tom Quinn's rather startling assertion that Meghan Markle was encouraging her husband to destroy the British monarchy. Well, if she succeeds in that, she'll be rather more effective even than George Washington and Paul Revere, because they only managed to rid America of the British monarchy, but they didn't actually destroy it. So this is, I don't know where Tom Quinn gets this information, but if it's true, it is rather remarkable. And of course, she may be taking on quite a lot, because the British monarchy has lasted 1,000 years and it's been through many crises. The worst crisis of the 20th century was the abdication crisis of 1936. And of course, in the past, one King Charles, the first King Charles, lost his head, and then we had 20 years of Oliver Cromwell, more or less a republic, a commonwealth, with the Lord Protector. So if this is true, stand by, because it's big news. I think rather more interesting, if I may say so, will be something that we've never seen, nobody alive has ever seen, and that will be this week a royal prince going into the witness box to give evidence in a very contentious case against Mirror Group newspapers. That hasn't happened ever since the 19th century, when Queen Victoria was very dismayed when her eldest son, the Prince of Wales, had to give evidence in two notorious cases, one about adultery and the other one about cheating at cards. So stand by this week for some interesting revelations, and I know that GB News is going to be all over the story.
Oh, we absolutely will be, Michael, and I'm sure it's going to be box office. How do you think the royal family will be feeling about Prince Harry partaking in this quite so publicly?
Well, I think they'll be inured to it. I think if Her Majesty the Queen was still with us, she would advise against it, because it is unprecedented. I mean, there's nothing in the British Constitution that says a royal prince cannot give evidence or cannot be called to be a witness. In fact, in the inquests into Diana, Princess of Wales, and Dodi Al-Fayed in 2007 to 8, the Duke of Edinburgh was called as a witness, but rather remarkably, the coroner, Lord Justice Thomas Scott Baker, permitted the Duke's private secretary to come and give evidence on his behalf, which was an extraordinary thing to do, but that's what happened, and I was there and witnessed it. So they will be inured to a certain extent to anything that's coming out of Montecito from the couple who live on the Hill, but they will not be welcoming it. But I think from Prince Harry's point of view, he probably thinks it's a question of going into the witness box and presenting his truth, if you will. But anybody, and I know you two, have witnessed major cases in court cases, they turn around on cross-examination. And this may be quite uncomfortable for him because Mirror Group newspapers are defending this case quite vigorously. And I'm quite sure their KC, their King's Counsel, will be taking the Prince to areas of his life that he perhaps wishes had been forgotten.
Michael, you talk about his truth, a very interesting phrase, because that's been questioned. Recently, we saw this paparazzi chase, this high-speed, hour-long paparazzi chase across New York, which seemed to be a bit of a figment of their imagination. Do you think things like that are damaging Prince Harry's credibility as a witness who can be relied upon to tell the truth and not his truth?
Well, you're absolutely right, Martin. I mean, I think that did leave them open to even mockery, that you could take part in or be chased through Manhattan for 2 hours. Well, the mayor very elegantly put it down. He was a former policeman, in fact, in the transit police, and he said that it was most unlikely. He was sympathetic to them. He didn't approve in any way of the fact that they were pursued, but he said it was unlikely, and that was also discounted by other people. I think they were
Michael, I'm afraid that we've run out of time with you, Michael. Sorry, we're coming to the end of the hour. Thank you very much for your time and your expertise. As always, do stay with us. We'll have all the top stories for you on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your Sunday morning weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst. Well, it's a bit of a chilly start out there, but it will become warm as that strong early June sunshine gets to work. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure continues to dominate the weather pattern, keeping it largely dry and settled, and that remains the case for much of next week, though some showers may start to creep nearer as we move towards next weekend. But for now, it's a bright start for many. We do have some low cloud across northeast Scotland running down some eastern parts of England, but this slowly lifts and breaks and burns back to the coast this morning. And then for the afternoon, most places sunny, some cloud bubbling up across Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland. An isolated light shower is possible, but plenty of sunshine to come. Temperatures reaching the mid-20s, 25, 26 Celsius possible across western parts of Wales, but still always chilly down that eastern coast. Temperatures really struggling, 12, 13 degrees with that low cloud not too far away. And we can see that low cloud pushing back in through this evening into Monday morning, turning quite grey, drizzly to start the morning here, but clear skies holding on across the far west means a sunny start here. Temperatures dipping into single figures, but as soon as that sun begins to rise, temperatures will rise quite quickly. Grey start, though, across parts of the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland, and then this cloud will take its time to burn back through Monday morning, slower than it has done compared to the weekend, but it will lift and break. Perhaps some parts of East Anglia, eastern England is holding on to a bit more cloud, and it'll be chilly here once more. But further west, again, plenty of sunshine and temperatures reaching the mid-20s in one or two spots. And for the next few days, it stays very similar. Plenty of sunshine to come, particularly in the west, always more in the way of cloud in the east, and temperatures rising, getting towards the mid-20s for many of us.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Sunday the 4th of June, coming up for you this morning.
Manchester City are FA Cup winners, beating Manchester United 2-1 at Wembley yesterday. With a famous treble on the horizon, can anybody stop the mighty Blues?
A new code of practice for the police has come into effect, aiming to better protect freedom of speech. It ensures officers only record non-crime hate incidents when absolutely necessary.
And American presidential hopeful Ron DeSantis launched an attack on Joe Biden's leadership yesterday, telling supporters in South Carolina that the president's fall on stage on Thursday summed up America's decline.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
Good morning. There was plenty of sunshine across the UK on Saturday. Will we see more of the same today? Join me a little later on for the morning weather.
Top of the morning on this sunny Sunday, I'm Martin Daubney.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Our top story, a new code of practice for the police came into effect yesterday that will protect freedom of speech by ensuring officers record non-crime hate incidents only when absolutely necessary.
Yes, the new code of practice will safeguard people's fundamental right to freedom of expression, protect their personal data, and ensure that non-crime hate incidents are not recorded when someone is merely offended.
And coming up after breakfast today is the Camilla Tominey Show, and Camilla joins us now.
Good morning.
Morning. Looking resplendent in Robin Hood green.
This is my Robin Hood look. Yeah, I'm glad you appreciate it,
And I'm from
Martin.
Nottingham, so I do appreciate it.
Love that.
This story, we spoke to Peter Blexley earlier,
Yes.
former Met copper, absolutely welcomes the fact that police can get back to policing the streets and not messing around policing tweets.
Yeah, wasn't the original expression about this, I think it was said to Harry Miller, we've come round to police your thinking.
Yes.
And he rightly said, well, not sure that's your job. There's no way on earth that coppers want to be doing this, and I think it's been a long time coming. It's interesting to see that what this new measure is going to do is kind of present a threshold.
Yeah.
So we all know that hate speech does exist. And if it is hate speech which is leading to inciting violence against a group of people or an individual, obviously it's completely unacceptable and nobody would allow that. But when people have perhaps misspoken, or they haven't had an intention to harm, or where they've basically just wanted to express an unpopular view, we all know that there's no place for the police to be policing that. You know, we have got the right to disagree in this country, believe it or not. You know, recent events suggest that there are many different institutions, including our universities, that are trying to shut down people that they don't agree with. But we don't live in the kind of democratic environment where we have this theory that if you don't agree with me, then you're not only wrong, but you might be a criminal. We can't have that. So it's no surprise at all that the police are supporting this. Equally, I think this is a good manoeuvre from Suella Braverman, who is under pressure because of the migrant crisis, which, by the way, I'm going to be discussing with our colleague Robert Jenrick on my show a little later, because it's a small C Conservative thing to be pushing freedom of speech and expression. Obviously, as a journalist, I'm all for that. But I think this is a victory for common sense. And certainly GB viewers and listeners will be thinking, well, thank goodness for that, because I don't want the police at my door because I've tweeted something that some people on the platform don't agree with.
100%.
Also, we don't have enough police to be policing people's thoughts. We want them to be out on the streets solving crime. So I think this is a great development.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our viewers are feeling that the remit was too wide anyway, and they want to see bobbies on the beat. That's a very, very welcome news for them. Rishi Sunak is in Washington this week, Camilla.
Yes.
What will be on the agenda?
Well, he's going to be meeting with Biden. He's trying to rekindle the special nature of the special relationship after, I suppose you could say, under successive governments, maybe that bond that we associate between Thatcher and Reagan has somewhat faded over the years. It's quite interesting, having seen on our headlines, we're talking about Ron DeSantis having been very critical of Biden after falling over and seeming perhaps too old for a second term in office. I think for Rishi Sunak, this plays to his strengths. The criticism of him is that he's this kind of internationalist and a globalist. But actually, because he studied in America, he's very familiar with the Californian way of life. He had that green card issue, you'll remember, because he was once an American citizen.
He's donating $2.5 million to US colleges. Well, the front of one of the
good for him. That's the benefit of having a lot of your wife's cash, I guess. But also, I think in terms of him positioning himself as the statesman, having serious discussions about issues like Ukraine, I think he's going to use the opportunity to push for Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, to be head of NATO. He's also going to be talking again about a trade deal. Remember Barack Obama saying that Brexit would put us at the back of the queue. Let's see if he can rekindle those talks. But, of course, the biggest pressure he's going to face is the pitching of this baseball. Do you know that when he...
It's terrifying to do that.
Terrifying. It's 60 feet or 20 metres, although apparently he was very good at cricket at school, so he should have a good throwing arm. But it's a different discipline, isn't it? Pitching a baseball versus fast bowling or spin.
I can't imagine anything more terrifying than the world watching you, being a bit limp-wristed, missing the mark, being completely rubbish. Like, my worst nightmare would be taking a penalty and missing. You'd never, ever forgive yourself.
Absolutely horrific. Also, what's he going to wear? Because apparently Obama got absolutely mocked because he put some jeans on. He did that thing where he tried to be down with the kids and wore denim. Do we want to see Rishi Sunak in denim? If he wears an expensive pair of trainers, the media will tear him to pieces. So there are a lot of pitfalls. So let alone the kind of bilaterals that are going on. There's also this important sporting event at the centre of it.
Yeah,
a lot of pressure on Rishi Sunak. So what have you got coming up on the show?
Well, Robert Jenrick's going to be a great guest because obviously everybody watching and listening to this is very interested to hear what he says, not only about the illegal migration situation, and this is coming on the back of a load of stories about him getting tough with migrants in hotels and saying bad luck if you're four to a room, you can't complain if you're coming here for sanctuary in this country. I also want to ask him about the legal migration figures. Is he happy with that 606,000? Why won't the government put a cap on these numbers? In previous years, they've put caps on it. We'll remember under Cameron, he said he wanted it to be limited to 100,000. Now it's 6 times as many, so let's see what he says about that. I also wouldn't mind drawing him a little bit into the kind of Rishi and Boris Johnson dynamic. Stories in the newspapers today about this disparity of opinion over the handing over of the WhatsApp messages to the COVID inquiry. Boris Johnson's happy to give these messages up because it's suggested in the Mail on Sunday he thinks they will expose Rishi Sunak's manoeuvring when it comes to the leadership race. And has Rishi Sunak got something to hide, Martin? I don't know.
Possibly, but also because Boris was quite a libertarian and some of his decisions back then were very heavily criticised, but with the benefit of history, moving forward, maybe he'll come out of it looking quite good.
Possibly he will. But, I think the Cabinet Office is looking increasingly stupid for pursuing this legal action when Boris Johnson himself has handed over his messages. I've got another couple of very great guests I just want to mention. I've got Cindy Jackson in, who was once described as sort of the most operated on woman in the UK. She's had a lot of plastic surgery, but she's now turned the tables, and she's talking about her new book, How Not to Get Botched, and how common it is for people, particularly having fillers, for it to all go wrong. The other great guest I've got is Molly Kingsley. Now, she's one of the people who have been monitored by the government's counter-disinformation unit. Telegraph splashed this on Saturday. It's an astonishing story about how lockdown critics were spied on and maybe even had social media posts removed. Molly's a mother. She was campaigning against lockdown, in particular in relation to children. She didn't want schools to be closed or them to wear masks. Why was she silenced? Why was she monitored? I want to hear her story later.
That's a great... So we had an interview earlier with an activist who we talking about deaf kids were unable to see lip reading in classrooms. Masks had a terrible impact. But you mentioned that at the time. You're a conspiracy theorist, you're a bit of a loon. So it's really interesting to see that actually those people were probed, they were nudged, and there was a conspiracy of a cover-up. It's a great story to cover.
Yeah, so it's all that and more to come at 9:30.
And lovely Nicholas Owen on paper.
Oh, we love Nicholas Owen, who is a friend of this station and a friend of broadcasting generally. He's getting his teeth stuck into the papers as we speak, and he's got lots to cover, so I look forward to that too.
Oh, it's a great show. Thank you so much, Camilla. Don't miss that. It's coming up at 9:30.
OK, and up next, from footballer to world-renowned artist, David Molley will be joining us live to talk about his career. This is GB News. Please stick with us.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back on this sunny Sunday. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie. And please remember to get in touch with us all the usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, Manchester City remain on course for a legendary treble after victory in the FA Cup final at Wembley yesterday.
Yeah, OK, Gundogan scored twice to give them victory over Manchester United in a largely one-sided affair. Although, to be fair, United had a good pop. Our reporter, Sophie Reaper, has the story.
One city, two teams. One red, one blue. An ancient rivalry played out in an FA Cup final for the very first time. Yesterday, tens of thousands of Manchester City and Manchester United fans made the pilgrimage to Wembley in order to support their teams. As the day wore on and kick-off drew ever closer, it was clear expectations were high.
100% trust in them. Too much trust in them. But we're going to beat them anyway, it's fine.
I'm quietly confident. I'm very confident, actually.
Derby matches are always a bit of a nightmare, but fingers crossed.
We're big underdogs and they're a hell of a team. They've done brilliantly. But I believe we can beat them today.
I've supported them for so long and it's our time now. It's just our time.
At 3 o'clock, the whistle blew and the game began. Within just 13 seconds, City's captain Ilkay Gundogan had smashed a volley into the back of the net. Not only did that give his side a near instantaneous lead, but it also broke the record for the fastest goal ever scored in an FA Cup final. After that, the United fans were forced to wait with bated breath for a response. And in the 33rd minute, their patience was rewarded when Bruno Fernandes took to the penalty spot and made it count. In the end, a second goal from City's captain clinched a win for the Manchester Blues.
I'm absolutely elated. 2 out of 3. We're going to do the treble. We're going to take it from them after a whole history of hurt.
We expected a tight game, but yeah, absolutely fantastic. Best day ever.
We deserved it. First goal, 13 seconds, 15 seconds. You know, I've just lost for words.
A disappointment for the United fans yesterday, but there were still some positives to be taken away.
I'm gutted, but I'm proud of him. I think they did really well.
I think we could do more tackling in this season. But in next season, we might get some new players to do better.
Overall, I think a good season, and next season, title challenge again.
It was two titans of the game that went head-to-head yesterday, but ultimately it was Pep Guardiola's Manchester City that came out victorious. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Manchester City on our way to Istanbul.
And former Liverpool player David Molley has gone from kicking balls and making art and has become a world-renowned artist with some pretty big clients, we just heard, potentially exceeding his football career.
Well, his latest work is going to be on display at the Qantas Gallery from Wednesday, and art lovers will be able to enjoy original paintings, edition prints and hand-embellished football boots. And we're very pleased to say that David Molley is in the studio with us now. Good morning to you, David. Great to have you with us.
Good morning.
And before we get into your art, and you've got so many fabulous stories to tell about that, we need to get your reaction to the FA Cup final yesterday.
Yeah, sure,
what did you make of it?
To be fair, I wasn't expecting the first goal. Nobody was.
Who did?
So,
13 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. So, it was a great game, honestly. So, yeah, for somebody who's neutral, so, yeah, it was a great game.
And something we'd just like to get your take on, and we've been talking about all the way throughout the morning, a United fan wore a very provocative football shirt.
Yeah.
As somebody with very strong connections to Liverpool Football Club, what do you make of the thought pattern of somebody even going there?
If I'm being honest with you, there's no space for that in the game. So, and knowing the club as well as I do, that's one of the worst things that you can do, honestly.
Sorry, David, just explain what we're talking about here. So it's a football shirt with 97 on the back and the words "not enough" at the top, obviously referring to the 97 people who died at Hillsborough.
At Hillsborough, absolutely. So, the history is there, and for somebody to do, something as stupid as that, it shouldn't be on, absolutely.
And I think, actually, it was not only the right thing to arrest him, but it probably would have saved him from a bit of a...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's probably what... You
know what I'm saying?
Him getting arrested is probably the best thing that would happen to him.
Yeah, before safe at the back of a van.
There you go, absolutely.
Any Liverpool fans. Now, let's talk about your art. So tell us about it, what you do.
So I'm an artist. I started painting about 5 years ago. Yeah. So before that, I was a professional athlete, so yeah.
It's amazing the skill set that you must so clearly have, because you've gone from being a professional sportsman playing for Liverpool, and you've obviously got this really creative side of your personality as well. Have you always had that, or have you had to work hard and craft a certain side of your skill set?
I've always had it, but obviously art and sports, two different things. So playing football now into art, two different industry. So but
and there's a lot of pop culture icons, and they're sort of very Warhol-esque. In terms of your influencers, you're sort of putting these people out, you give them the treatment, and it's gone down well with some famous punters, some stars out there, some household names have snapped up your work. Can you tell us who's got an eye for your work?
Yeah, there's a few, to be fair. In the Premier League, I've done work for Riyad Mahrez, Raheem Sterling, Luke Shaw, Rashford. The list goes on, to be fair. So, there's a few there.
And do you think it is your background that almost encourages the Premier League footballers to buy your work? They want to support you because of where you've been, or do you think they just love your artwork standalone by itself?
I think it's a bit of both, really, because I'm someone that they can easily relate to as well. So I understand them, I know what they like. So I'm just happy that my artwork is in their house. So.
Is that quite a cool thought for you, to think of like Riyad Mahrez? And
every time I think about it, to be fair, I'm like,
it's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it?
It's not bad.
It's also great to see that your Liverpool background hasn't put off Man United players.
There you go, exactly.
Players buying
you would think so, right?
Yeah.
But nah. So everybody from the Premier League, literally from like every single team I could name, at least a player that has my painting.
So is it a good time, now that the cat's out of the bag and all these big names, is it a good time to invest in a piece of your stuff? Because the value's going to start going up and up and up with all these...
Exactly. Exactly. Right? So, there's no better time than now. So if you want a piece, you know who to come to.
Yeah. And it's amazing because so many young lads leave football and they're kind of directionless. There's a lot of criticism about there's not enough support for them. But you've really found a fantastic new gig. But why did you leave the game? What happened? What's your story?
My story is pretty much with injuries. I knew from the age of 22 that I wasn't going to go on and play, till 35 and whatnot. So I knew I had to do something a little bit different. So I was lucky enough to find art. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of young kids that get released from academies or, as young pros. But because there's no other skill set, so there's nothing else that they can really do outside of playing football.
And there aren't many punditry jobs, there aren't many training jobs, so you have to go elsewhere. But what was it, where did you sort of get into art? Like, you know, who's inspired to do this? And was it something you've always done, or was it something you had to find, hey, I need something new to do after football?
It was pretty much straight after football. I didn't have time to think about it. It's like it literally happened in the space of, 6 months? Got into it, and then I thought, you know what, this is something I can really do and take it to the next level. So I worked hard at it, and thankfully it worked out. So.
And frankly, you were very, very successful. I mean, clearly you're a humble guy, but you do make a lot of money through this as well, don't you? I mean,
why not?
They've gone up.
If I'm watching this, I'm not.
I mean, you're doing well, aren't you?
Yeah, I would like to think so. So every year we always like to. Obviously, it's not just me. I have a whole team as well with the gallery that I work with at Qantas. So it's not just me. Like I mentioned, I have a whole team. So I have to give them credit too, you know.
Yeah. Oh, he's so humble. He's already passed it on to the team.
Yeah, beautiful. So we want to show a few of your pictures on the screen, and maybe you can talk us through what they are. Here we go.
Absolutely. That's Virgil Abloh. So he's going to be at the show. Michael Jackson, of course.
So you kind of take a pop culture figure, and then you've almost got graffiti over the top. Is that fair to describe your art?
Yeah, so that's pretty much my whole, and then obviously
And how big are these? Are they like Banksy's, like the size of a house? How big and, you know?
These particular artwork that's going to go at the show, they are 1 metre by 1 metre.
OK.
So, yeah, so they're fairly large, to be fair.
But that's the sort of piece, that's the sort of size that the people want, right?
Absolutely,
on their wall.
yeah, so it's not massive or anything, but it's the right size for the wall, in a hallway, living room. So, yeah, it's perfect.
So you've got a show coming up this week.
Yep.
How are you feeling about that?
I'm excited. It took a long time. It took me about 2 months to complete all the artwork, so I was just happy that they were all done, and I'm really excited for it. It's going to be one of the biggest shows I've ever had, so, yeah, it's going to be really excited.
And what can people expect from the show?
I don't even know what to expect, but I know that it's going to be amazing. So, yeah, if anybody can come down to our Qantas gallery on Wednesday, it'll be amazing.
It's free to get in, or is it ticket only? Or
you need to get at the gallery to guest list. On Wednesday is a private viewing, and then after Wednesday.
Now, there's some pretty big names that have bought your art. Do the paparazzi need to be there? You expecting a few VIPs to turn up?
Yeah, it's going to be a few names, but we're not going to name one until you get there.
No, of course. Don't give the game away. Magnificent.
David Wally, it's wonderful to meet you.
No, honestly, thank you.
Good luck with the show.
Thank you guys for having me, honestly.
Wednesday, it's in Shoreditch. Do check it out if you like the look of that art. But thank you so much for your company over the weekend. We are back on Friday because Stephen's in sunny Spain. That's it from us, but do stay tuned because up next is Camilla Tominey's show. This is GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your Sunday morning weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst. Well, it's a bit of a chilly start out there, but it will become warm as that strong early June sunshine gets to work. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure continues to dominate the weather pattern, keeping it largely dry and settled, and that remains the case for much of next week, though some showers may start to creep nearer as we move towards next weekend. But for now, it's a bright start for many. We do have some low cloud across northeast Scotland running down some eastern parts of England, but this slowly lifts and breaks and burns back to the coast this morning. And then for the afternoon, most places sunny, some cloud bubbling up across Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland. An isolated light shower is possible, but plenty of sunshine to come. Temperatures reaching the mid-20s, 25, 26 Celsius possible across western parts of Wales, but still always chilly down that eastern coast. Temperatures really struggling, 12, 13 degrees with that low cloud not too far away. And we can see that low cloud pushing back in through this evening